Hey, everybody, welcome to another DMV Comic Book Nerds podcast. I'm your host, Freddy, and today I'd like to introduce you to a new friend of mine. His name is Travelle. Hey, Travelle, how are you today?
What's up, bro? I'm doing well, man. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited to talk about this episode with you. Are you excited?
Thanks, man. I'm very excited, actually. I'm very excited. I was actually looking forward to this interview the whole week, so I'm very much excited.
Yeah, like we are here today to
Yeah.
discuss X-Men 97, Season 1, Episode 5, Remember It. And I gotta say, like, I have been experimenting with whether or not we discuss comic books first or comic books last.
Yeah.
I think today we got to put it towards the end of the podcast and focus on the show because this episode was huge. There's a lot to talk about. But even before we do that, one thing we got to do is introduce ourselves a bit more. So, real quick, I'll just say, I'm Freddie, I'm 35. I am black and queer, and I just love talking about the X-Men and reading and watching all the X-Men stuff out there. But tell us a little bit about yourself, Travell.
Oh, thank you for giving me the floor. I appreciate that. I'm actually 35. I'm black, and I actually live in Queens, New York. I've been living here for the past 10 years now. I am also queer. I am a Afrofuturist. I'm a practicing Afrofuturist, and I'm actually trying to become more of a writer. I've been a writer for quite some time, but this is something that I'm at a point in point in time in my life in which I want to take it a little bit more seriously. So I actually have my own newsletter. It's called The Wanderings of the Big Boy Nerd. I just kind of talk about random things that really interest me about nerd culture, and are really important to me about nerd culture and pop culture, and try to infuse it with some semblance of sociology and mental health. So there's a lot of different things that I actually talk about in that realm, but use characters and comic book lore as a throughway to talk about these things. So I think that overall I just try to be me. I'm a dad now, and that's like been a new experience for me. So being a nerdy dad that still reads comic books and plays video games and still believes in trying to set a decent example for my daughter. I think that that kind of bit sums me up at this point in time in my life.
Awesome. That's what's up, man.
Yeah,
Like you mentioned
yeah.
your writing. I saw that you recently had
Mhm.
a writing a piece that you put out. Was it on Medium
I did. Yeah, I
about
did.
the
Yeah,
X-Men and your brother and growing up and like would you speak on that a bit?
yeah, indeed. Yeah, of course. Thank you for bringing that up. Actually, yeah, I actually wrote a piece called "Chris Help Me Beat This Level." It was about my relationship with my older brother, and I came from a really complex background. I was raised with my grandparents, so my grandfather adopted me, and he had a wife, and his wife raised me as her son. And she was married from she had a child from a prior marriage, and her by the time I was born, he was already like 15, 16. So he became my older brother. So we weren't really even related by blood. And we were related sort of by just simply by marriage and family. So but he was my first introduction into any sort of pop culture and comic book media. And one of the key linking things was video games for him and I. And we used to play this X-Men game in 90. I think the game came out in 94, 95. The game came out. But it was a really an amazing experience for me to actually be in a position in which I could try to rely on him and learn how to learn this new system, learn how to like play a video game, but also to be vulnerable enough to just ask him for help. I have a really hard time asking for help, especially being a man of color, being a black man. I haven't really been taught to ask for help, to
Mhm.
the ways in which to ask for help. So, having those experiences with my older brother really put me on the path to actually learning how to like build a little bit of empathy for myself and learn a way to actually to connect with someone else. So I wrote about that whole experience, how like the origins of that experience and how it's connected to the X-Men and it's connected to my brother and it's connected to just all the experiences that kind of make me who I am to this day. So I kind of infused it with all those different memories and those different experiences.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. Like
Yeah.
I read through it
Thanks,
and I,
man.
I could really feel like all the emotions that you had for your brother and like all the all just the experience that you had. Like you were so good at describing just
Thank you.
what it felt like growing up and just like as a kid, like especially this particular game. It was a hard game.
Yeah, it was a hard freaking
And
game. It was so
yeah,
hard.
so it was like really cool that your brother was like not only willing to help you, but like he could beat those levels.
Yeah, man. Have you ever like had that experience in your life in which you like had somebody that like there's like a special experience around that? It's sort of like I was just talking to my wife about this about how like it's the same space that you take up when you ask someone to explain how to pronounce something. It's
Mhm.
that sort of trust that you give to someone that you're vulnerable, you could be wrong, but you trust this person to not make fun of you. You trust this person to not like belittle you for asking a question. That was such a powerful experience, and it's so vulnerable. And me being like a young black kid and being in this family that was atypical and having older parents and not being with my direct family, just like trying to make sense of the world around me, to have someone that actually was kind and patient with me was like a really really huge deal. So I was curious, do you have any experience like that with you in your life that you've like had a person that was like you would like go to them and if you had a question about something or if you needed them to beat a level for you in a video game, did you ever had anybody in your life like that?
Well, that's a great question. Like, thanks for asking.
Mhm.
I will
Yeah.
say I gotta shout out my cousin, my older cousin. Um, he his name was Jason, and he lived in West Virginia, which was,
Hmm.
pretty far from me over here in DC, but
Hmm.
we would visit every so often, and like he's the one who got me into
Hmm.
comic books. Like he had the love
Mm.
for it first, like comic books and
Mm.
superheroes and all that stuff. Like I
Right.
used to love like just going through his collection and and playing video games
Yeah.
with him and my other cousins, and like
So
we all, it was just a great time. Like growing up,
yeah.
that was some of my favorite memories. So um
Right.
yeah, like it's always so meaningful to have those relationships, to have an older brother or cousin or friend who can like guide you and you can be vulnerable
Hmm.
with and just have fun, and someone who can be a mentor. Like we need mentors in our community, like you said, as black men in particular, like, and
Right.
especially I would say as queer black men, because like
Indeed.
it's so hard to like find role models and to
Right.
feel like accepted even most of the time. So it's like all those relationships we have where we can connect and bond and feel that we can trust each other, so valuable.
True indeed. I couldn't agree with you more. And I appreciate you actually sharing that with me about your cousin. I appreciate that a great deal because I think that there is like something to be said about like the sort of like intimacy between black men in those sort of spaces. There's something to be said about that, about like the willingness to just be vulnerable with another black man in that way. Either it be your older brother, your other older cousin, or someone in your space that actually has kind of like mentored you. It like changes your whole relationship with how you build relationships, especially with other black men. It changes your own sense of like self identity. At least that's how I tend to think about it with my brother. So I appreciate you sharing that because it makes me feel a little bit less alone. That like I had that experience with my brother, and I feel like you just sometimes you have certain experiences they just feel so insular. They feel like they're just yours. And to hear that you're able to share that with me, that means a lot to me. So thank you, truly.
Thank you. I can't wait to
Yeah,
hear more about you mentioned to me off the podcast that you have an Afrofuturist podcast that you are building and working on. Can you tell us more about
yeah.
that?
Absolutely. Now, Afrofuturism, I've actually gone through a bit of a metamorphosis around like how I've actually began to actually perceive it for myself. I, for one, have been in the space for quite some time, but it hasn't been something that I was like, oh, like let me understand how to use this as a practice, as an everyday practice. Because I usually thought about Afrofuturism as like more of an aesthetic, like a kind of a life, like a way that you kind of kind of present yourself and think about certain things in the world. Not necessarily a practice. You see, I
Hmm.
can understand that that it can obviously materialize as a practice if you live a certain culture. However, I never thought about like what that those practices entail. What does that require? What does all that require? And when I actually took some time and actually did some research around Afrofuturism, I've learned that I've been an Afrofuturist for quite some time. I have took some time and I've read Natasha Womack's book on Afrofuturism. I've hunted down different people that actually do work in Afrofuturism and listened to their interviews and interviewed them on in certain ways. And in fact, I actually have people in that space that actually do work in the Afrofuturist space that I know personally that I really feel connected to. And I thought that it's important to sort of showcase and highlight the different elements of Afrofuturism, but also beyond that, kind of sort of just kind of be more of a voice for people of color in the future. I think that there's a lot of talk about the future, but there isn't enough like conversation with Black people in that space or people of color in that space. I think that there are people of color already doing this work around like Afrofuturist work. Absolutely. However, I think that it should be more mainstream. I just think that the more we talk about it, the more it becomes more important. And honestly, what really tilt this whole thing on its head for me and really crystallized it this year was I did my annual rereading of Parable of the
Mm,
Sower by Octavia
Octavia
Butler.
Spencer, Butler, sorry,
Yes, yeah,
Octavia
yeah,
Butler.
Butler, yeah. Yes. And it really put me into perspective to be like, holy shit, like there's so much because first and foremost, the book opens in 2024.
Hmm.
So it was hard for me not to consider this as something that was like could be real,
Hmm.
like because this book is it kind of takes place in the future. She wrote it in the 1970s, so
Hmm.
she was kind of predicting what the 2020s were going to look like, and there were so many things that were eerily accurate, and it made me think to myself, I'm like, this is scary enough for me to really invest in what it would look like to be an Afrofuturist and think about my future, especially because I have a daughter now.
Hmm.
So I started to investigate and try to understand and identify the different elements of Afrofuturism. And what I learned was that it's extremely vast and that there's a lot to talk about. And I can investigate it and then interview people on it. And I can be in a space in which I'm learning, but also trying to impart information onto people. So that's sort of like the tenets of my podcast is like I want to talk about all of what Afrofuturism is. There's elements of queer theory, feminism. There's speculative fiction. There's forecasting. There's all these different elements around like how we can think about the future through a Black lens, and sort of and the way I usually try to explain it is that when it comes to being Black, there is a particular in a Black in America that is in a Western civilization that is there is a specific almost tenacity that Black people have proven to have
Hmm.
around understanding how to think about the future and understanding how to use current ingenuity to re-engage themselves for the future. Either it be that there's Black people always like writing about what's going to happen in the future or predicting what's going to happen in the future, or just thinking about when they were slaves, thinking about how their life could be in the future. There's always these elements around that. And that in itself is a skill. That in
Hmm.
itself is to understand how to work within a capitalist system and using that to your avail. That's a skill. That's a form of like Black ingenuity that is Afrofuturist. And I think that that skill of being able to cultivate that is something that anybody can pick up, of understanding that level of tenacity and fortitude that it takes to be Black. If you respect the experience and all of that it entails, that is Afrofuturism. And there's a lot to talk about that. And there's a lot of ways in which that could be interpreted, and a lot of ways in which people can learn how to think about the Black experience in a new way. At least that's how I see it. And that's why I want to kind of drive my podcast around that.
I love that.
Sorry, I know it was a lot.
No,
That was a lot.
no,
I
no,
know.
it's great stuff. Like I can't wait to hear more. Do you have an idea of when your podcast might debut?
May. I'm actually starting it in May. My
Awesome.
in fact, yeah, there's someone that I am that is actually in that space that is an Afrofuturist that has done comic books that you may know him, and I got him as an interviewer, but I'm waiting to like book a date, and cannot wait to tell everybody about it because he's such a big deal in that space, and I've known him for a very long time, and now he's like willing to do a podcast with me, so it's a big deal to me. So I'm hoping sometime in May. That's what I'm
Very
really hoping
exciting.
for. Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
because like I have some people lined up, so I'm hoping it's sometime in May.
Well, keep us posted for sure. What you're
Absolutely.
saying about Afrofuturism,
Mhm.
like I love that. For me, I I'm aware of Afrofuturism as a concept. Different influences as well. Like you said, Octavia Butler. Like for me, Janelle Monáe comes to mind just with her albums and like, or even like Beyonce. Like right now, she's like,
Indeed,
envisioning
yes,
like paths to success and like for and just like togetherness for
right.
everybody really. But for me, I think what I've studied more is like Black liberation, which is tied to Afrofuturism, I believe. So it's like um I'd love to kind of to see how our thoughts on this topic applies to the X-Men because I have a lot of thoughts about
Oh
that.
yeah.
Um so often I'm like trying to restrain myself from being too,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
what's the word? Too candid about my thoughts about it. But I'm
Exactly.
entitled to my opinions and my thoughts, and just like everyone else. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to discuss, especially with this episode.
Oh heck yeah.
So let's go ahead and just get into it because
Hmm.
this episode was huge. Remember it.
Huge, huge.
Um,
Yeah.
there's so much to say.
Uh,
I don't even want to like give a recap. I just want to get your general thoughts
yeah, and
first,
like,
and feel free to discuss any
um,
spoilers. We're going deep into spoilers here. If you haven't watched it yet, go watch it and then come back.
yeah, you gotta, yeah. At this point, yeah, we're gonna give you a disclosure. If you have not watched it, please pause the video now, or pause the thing, whatever you're listening to right now, and go watch it, and come
Yeah.
back and listen to
I
what we're gonna say.
I will give a quick recap. I'll just say
Mhm.
in this episode, ooh,
Yeah,
we kind of
exactly.
start with there is New Genosha. Like it's become a mutant nation, it's become UN recognized. Magneto, Rogue, and Gambit fly out there to see what's going on in the new mutant nation. And meanwhile, Jean, Scott, Beast, Logan, and the rest of them are back at home. They're doing an interview with Trish Tilby, and
Hmm.
notably, Trish Tilby is a news reporter in the comics who's had a relationship with Beast for a time, so that could be
Right,
interesting. I kind
that's
of liked
right.
how they were flirting a
Hmm.
bit,
Yeah,
but
yeah, me too. I like that. Yeah.
but to get to the nitty gritty of this episode, I'll just say real quick. So we see the mutants in Genosha. There's tons of mutants. There's
Right.
like everybody there, mutants from all generations. They want Magneto to be the leader. Like they have a council, they have a government, but they want Magneto to lead it. He wants Rogue to lead with him, and Rogue has to make a decision about if she's going to choose Magneto over Gambit. She's leaning that way, but then at the big party and celebration, the inevitable happens. For fans of the X-Men, we know about, the Sentinels always come, the mutant haters always come. So
Always
that's
come.
exactly what happens. They
Right.
come to tear down this new nation, destroy it completely, kill as many as they can. Like it's a lot. Like
To say the least, to say the least.
yeah, like we
To
end with
say
some
the
major
least.
deaths, and
Yeah.
we'll discuss all
Yeah.
of that. But what were your general
Oof.
thoughts after like watching this
Um,
episode?
my general thoughts. Okay. Honestly, what I told my wife as soon as I turned it off, I said that is the greatest thing I've watched from the Marvel or the MCU since Endgame. That is like
Yes.
the like undoubtedly, and that's just one episode. That's not the culmination of the entire show. That's just one episode. That is the greatest thing that I've seen Marvel put out since Endgame. I'm
Yeah, like
very, very, I was like immensely impressed.
I gotta say I've seen so much
Mhm.
unanimous like uh opinion and this is first impressions, but most people are saying like this is huge. Like someone has said
Mhm.
this has to be the best X-Men anything ever, right?
Anything.
And that's
Yeah.
high praise. Like talking about comics, talking about
Yeah.
movies, talking about shows,
Right.
like X-Men
Right.
92 was already in the conversation for being a goated
Yeah.
show. So
Yeah.
like
True. True.
97 has big shoes to fill, and but they've been filling it from jump. Like each
How? Yeah,
episode has
but
been
how?
amazing.
I just don't understand how that's even possible. Like I was, to tell you the truth, I think that like this, like the old boy that's the showrunner, well, that was the showrunner, Beau. He has the god. He has the, like he is really a dope writer. I'm just thinking about like the decisions in regards to the story beats, just the way in which the exposition rolls out between the characters, the way that it's so smooth and organic, the way the dialogue among the characters to keep the plot moving. It's not stilted, it's not jilted, it's not just like it's not like, oh, we now have to go to Genosa. It's like, something backhanded will be said, and then somebody else will say something else and ask a question, and then from there it blossoms into someone giving this grandiose explanation, but it's done in a very 90s way. It's like, for instance, like Magneto will answer, but he'll answer like in a speech, and it's very like 90s, and I love that. There's like the ability to actually have all these touch points in your writing. I just think that it blows my freaking mind. I'm like, how the hell did he do that? How the hell did he like watch this show so intently and get that all right? It's just, I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed.
I am too. And like while we're on the topic of Beau DeMayo, like we have
Mhm.
discussed Beau DeMayo a bit on previous episodes. And I remain of the opinion I had before. Like I just want to know like what happened, because um the official word is that he parted ways with Disney right like the
Mhm,
week before
mhm.
the show aired, right before the premiere.
Right.
And we didn't really get any explanation as to why or what happened. And there's been speculation on both sides, like maybe he did something, or maybe Disney, acted too quickly. I don't know. Like
Mhm.
it's wild to me, because like this show has had such a positive reception. And like I said on episode 1, I'm like, if it's good, then we have to give him some credit for it, because he was the showrunner. He has so much involvement in what it is. But if it's bad, then he's going to have to shoulder the blame for that. And then sometimes when that happens, that's a reason to fire a showrunner if the show is not a success. But like this show is a
Right.
success,
It
so like,
is.
and so for him to have been fired before it even came out is just so curious. Like,
It's a massive success at that. It's massive. I don't think they even expected it to be as big as it was. Like LeBron James was tweeting like, "Oh, how could I watch the show?" It's like
yeah,
it's I did not I don't think they even expected it to have this much penetration. Honestly. I don't
right.
think
And
so.
it's like as a Black queer man, I'm just like, I want to show some solidarity. Like it's like I want to see, do we need to like rally around him and get him hired again, just the same way James Gunn was fired and rehired? Like, I mean, the situation's not exactly one to one, but like again, we don't
I
know what the
mean,
details are. We don't know if we should be rooting for him, or just understand that maybe there was a reason for the firing. We don't, or the parting of ways. Like I think it's. I just know if I was in his shoes, I would hate to like kind of be
yeah,
excommunicated
yeah.
at the height
Oh,
of the show's
that's such a
existence.
good word. It's such a good word with the X-Men shirt on. That's such a good word. Just a good
Yeah,
word. I
yeah.
agree.
I love the
I
X
agree.
words, like as many
There
as
it
I can
is,
think of.
man. There it is. There it is. That's good,
But
man. I like that.
no, but yeah, Beau DeMayo, if you're listening, you're welcome to the show. We'd love to hear from you directly,
Word,
or
please.
yeah, like we just want to know your experience working on this show. Um, and if you're under NDA, can't talk about it, that's okay. We still want you on the
Yeah,
show.
yeah. We still want you on the show just to ask you questions. Like
Yeah.
I also speak for the fan base here. Like we would love to hear you be interviewed on the show. Like
Mhm.
seriously, like Jesus Christ, because like I'm truly like I'm aghast if I do say so myself. I'm like really taken back about just like the stellar writing. It's just stellar. I
Yeah,
mean, like honestly, like it just
like
is.
everyone has been praising it. Beau DeMayo himself
Man,
is back on Twitter, talking about it
yeah.
and engaging with the fans. And like, um, I just think that, the only complaints that people have had is just that things sometimes feel rushed, but
Mm,
we can't really complain about that, because it's like every episode is like a movie, and every episode has like a lot happening. I think we'd rather have too much than not enough. Like
right,
it's go
right,
big
right,
or
right.
go home, right? Like you gotta give it
Mhm.
to us while
Yeah.
you can. We don't
This
know
is
how
what I
long this is
mean.
going to
Yeah,
last.
exactly. And I think that it's a good idea. The pacing is perfect because the pacing is 90s. They
Yeah,
would just like move through storylines like that crazy. do you remember like how many storylines was packed into like Spider-Man? Like they packed so many goddamn, and like one
Hmm.
episode they'd be like, oh, like they had like the Sinister Six and like pop up, but then like the Avengers popped up. It's like they had random. It's like they just kind of wove, and I think that's a part of like the art of actually how you balance the story and actually get so many different touch points and how you're able to pull so many different fans to have the balance to actually respect and understand how you can balance all of that. Not only pull from the comics and use that as a root, but also like how can you balance like different storylines from different generations in the comics and cater to all of them. And I think that Bo does that magnificently. He toes that line. And people say, "Oh yeah, it's too fast," but because he's commanding magic. He's doing magic. That's why it's fast. That's why it seems very fast because he's actually doing something that's not an easy thing to do as a writer. If you know just like the history of comics and how convoluted they can be, not
Hmm.
easy what he's doing. Not
Yeah,
easy.
X-Men comics can be very dense. A lot can
Yeah.
happen, a lot of drama,
Yes.
lots
Yes.
of action, lots of everything.
Yes, indeed.
And the 90s show was so good at like the original 92 show was so good at like streamlining some of these crazy comic events, putting them in 2, 3 part episodes and calling it a day. This show is doing stuff in like one episode. And
Yeah, and just
the
like one
episodes are a bit
episode.
longer, but they're, they managed to fit a lot in, and it's amazing. And um like on the topic of Beau DeMayo, while we're here, I just want to
Mhm.
say, like,
Mhm.
it is meaningful to see a black queer man running the show, because for decades the X-Men has been a property that's primarily been
Handled by
written
white
and
people,
handled by
white
white people.
dudes.
So like shout out though to like Larry Houston, who was like a director on the 92 show. Like if you don't know him, look him up and learn about him, because
No, it's
his
true.
work is amazing.
No,
But
right.
not to discredit any white creators, like they are all
No, no, no.
talented in their own regard. But I'm just saying, like, from a fan perspective, like, I was always drawn to the X-Men and their struggles, as a minority. Like, they the mutant metaphor is about the struggle of minorities. So it's like it is meaningful to see, you know, black people, queer people involved in telling these stories. And also we want to see them more in the stories too, because like that's a big part of it. Um, but I think things are like getting better, but like we're still not quite there yet where we're including everybody, both behind the scenes and on the page or on the screen. But
I have to agree with you. I do have to agree with you. See, I think that you make a fantastic points here. That it's important that the how this is being steered, this story, this show so far, being like steered by a queer man of color at that, like has so much to do, I think personally, with the quality and the decisions that are made around which touch points to touch on, because the this goes back into like this ties into what I was talking about Afrofuturism before. One of the core tenets of Afrofuturism is queer theory, and when you actually study queer theory, you study like this sort of subculture, right? And you study like the positioning around actually being like queer and having a dual identity in society and what that
mhm,
means versus like what your individual self has to deal with the larger culture, the larger society. And the X-Men really at their core represent, as you said, the minority position around those things. And if that is your lived in experience, like as it is for someone like Bo, you're automatically going to be able to actually write these characters with like a certain particular nuance that may not
mhm,
be seen by certain white writers. Not to take away from certain writers, because you've got like God writers like Claremont's the man. Like you can't front
yep,
on Claremont. Claremont's the man. So like you have people like that. Neil Adams is the man. Like you got really dope white writers. We know this, but there's also Priest. You know what I'm saying? Like
mhm,
who and he brings a specific perspective to Black Panther that a white writer can't do. And this is the
mhm,
same point what I make with the X-Men is that Bo is doing something that it only because I think like mainly due to his lived in experience really really drives home like how well he's writing these characters and writing this story and writing like the consequences and the conditions that they face and like just the stakes that these characters have. I think because he lives that experience. This is what I think.
I agree though, and
Mhm.
but I do want to mention that you know, prior to when this show came out, Beau DeMayo was very active on Twitter for a while, uh, and he was very opinionated. He said some things that rubbed fans the wrong way, by and large. Like for example, I think people uh thought he hated Emma Frost. I think he said he hated Emma Frost as Scott's love interest. Not that he hates Emma
Oh,
Frost as a character, but that's just one example. Like
what's
there
bad?
was an
What's wrong
issue.
with that?
I mean, he's entitled to his opinion. We're all entitled to our
There's a thing.
opinions. And what he does in the show, I'm sure he'll like. I figured he would make it interesting. Like I was willing to give him a chance before I made judgment on it, but there have been other things like, for instance, there was a conversation around Sunspot, which is ongoing, honestly. Like, I
Hmm.
remember, um, a lot of fans were upset with what he said, or what has been done around like the casting of Sunspot's voice actor. And I was looking into
Interesting.
it to get some more facts on it. Um, I'll pull it up right here.
Hmm.
So there's an article on Tunado.com where that talks about how Beau DeMayo actually left social media after he was accused of whitewashing Sunspot, and this was before the parting of ways with uh, Disney. Um, like it was a tense couple of days, but
Washing
this
them.
article, it does include some of his quotes, and here's what he said. In response to fans who felt that Sunspot's skin tone in the show was too light for an Afro-Brazilian, he said, I will not indulge fans believing that they are entitled to be the arbiter of someone else's identity, and whether or not they are this or that enough. At the proper time, there will be plenty of insights into what decisions are we made and why. When Marvel gives me the go, I will be very frank and transparent. Um, he said, I value fans' opinions, but the sheer amount of vitriol in the past 24 hours is truly taxing and actually risks working against what you're trying to do, as it's now closed off at an access point because I have to protect myself. Because he has been called a quote unquote race traitor. He's been called all kinds of things. Like he's been called racist and homophobic at the same time as being black and queer. And while it's true that sometimes people can have internalized, racism and homophobia, it's just wild to see allegations against black queer people of being racist and homophobic.
But this is see, but this goes back to my point that I made before is that like he is actually literally steering the ship on this show, and yet and still like he still is subject to the same things the X-Men would be subject to. He's still subject to these same exact experiences. It's like why is it that people like if he was a white showrunner like Mark Guggenheim or whatever that did all that did that whole the whole Arrow universe shit, Mike Guggenheim and all of them, Greg
Mhm.
Weisman and all of them white dudes, them cats like they did whatever they wanted. Like they made Mr. Terrific gay. Made him
I mean,
he became
most people will
queer.
agree
Who
they
like
ruined Black
right.
Canary. Like,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They ruined Black Canary. Like he didn't get this type of vitriol. They giving him comics now. He's writing for DC. He's like one of the head writers of DC right now. He's moving up. But Bo is fired, and y'all mad. Even before he was fired, y'all mad because he made a decision around something that's made to entertain y'all. Like, are you serious? Like, I think his response to it was quite eloquent, and I really hope that he's doing well. And I think that like I wish him the best because like dog, like he's just trying to like do his job and do and like actually really nail home what he thinks these characters mean and like what they mean to him. So like I think that like so it's like what he's not a fan of the characters himself. Like he's like it's like that's a hard
like
position to be in.
Like he's clearly a fan of these characters, and whether or not we
Yeah,
agree 100% with every decision he's made, I think it's fair to say that he's made some good decisions because this is a quality
I
show.
think so.
I
That
think, I mean, regarding Sunspot, I know it's a very sore spot for a lot of fans, myself included, because so often media has failed to portray Sunspot and the way that we view is correct, like based off of his original depiction. Um,
right.
But I just don't want to confuse what Beau DeMayo said for what other people have said, because I do think, like we were talking
Hmm.
about it, and like the director of the New Mutants movie, he was the one who had said
Right.
that he didn't think it mattered about his skin tone. He's like, I don't believe that he can be uh Brazilian and black and rich. Like what are you talking about? Some of the things that director said, I can't remember his name, but they seem
Whoa.
more racially biased, I will say, than
Whoa.
what's
Whoa.
going on with Sunspot here. Like this depiction of
Wow. Yeah.
Sunspot is darker than he was in the movie, so I appreciate that. But it is curious when like this particular show did make an effort to like show Storm, like they gave Storm a darker skin tone, which a lot of fans have been waiting
Hmm.
for. But then you have
Hmm.
Roberto, who's kind of like in the middle, and that's okay. I mean,
Hmm.
people have a range of skin tones in real life, so like let's represent everybody. But
It's like, and there's Brazilians that are light skinned as well. Like there's
mhm,
Brazilians that also have a really bright, like a little, like a very light complexion as well. That's there's variations. And we're not a monolith. Like we're not.
absolutely.
I don't know.
So like it's hard to like uh say who's right and who's wrong
Right.
on
People are
matters about
entitled
fictional characters. Like these are fictional
about
characters at the end of the
see,
day.
but here, but also like in the same case, like that's very true. But also, I try my best to validate people's responses around that. Like, yes, it's valid. Like that's your lived in experience. You believe that that's something that you believe should have a little bit more representation for whatever reasons. Like, cool, that's valid.
Yeah,
However, like like that criticism is can be heard, but then after that criticism is heard, like what more can that person do? Like they've made the show as it is.
hmm,
However, like maybe they could take the notes and think about it going forward into further seasons, or maybe like if they decide to put Sunspot another, another show or whatever, they can make that decision. But at this point in time, this is what it is, and we understand that this is criticism and that's in the ether. We get it, so we can move forward from there. So I just don't get why people would feel the need to like just terrorize this poor man. That's just to me, it
right.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't
I
think
have
that
says,
the a lot of the criticism. I mean, I'll just say my opinion. I don't think a
mm,
lot of the criticism is balanced. I mean, I understand where it's coming from, but I do think on the internet we have a tendency to believe the worst about people, and judge people maybe harshly, even without even seeing what's going on or knowing the full story. So I do want to do my best to try and figure out what the full story is, and also um you know judge accordingly. Like I think, like I said, it might not be 100% what we want, but if it's like 95% what we want, then why are we really mad? Like, I don't
yeah,
know.
exactly. But like I said, like you can't like you literally cannot please anyone, everyone.
Right.
It's just like it is actually an impossibility. You
Especially with the
cannot
X-Men.
please
Like
anyone.
like that's why
Yeah.
I'm so afraid of the X-Men live action stuff that the
Hmm.
MCU might be doing. Like there's been rumors that they're planning to start production in 2025 on live action X-Men stuff.
Oh
And I'm
boy.
very nervous about it. Like I feel like this show
Set a hard
uh
bar already. It's already set a hard bar
it's set a
again,
very high bar, and like
just like the original one did. Just like the original one did.
yeah, and I've always said that animation is a better medium anyway for these kinds of
Thank you.
stories, because you can,
Thank you, sir.
like, it's just a fact,
Ugh,
because
it's a fact.
you can tell serialized stories, you can show the
Right.
fantastical
Right.
powers, you can
Right.
hire a large cast of people who are going to be committed,
Yes.
rather than
Yes.
movie stars who make it more about them rather than about the characters. So there's so many
Can I
things, so many.
I agree. Can I share something with you?
Sure.
Okay, so it's quick little detour, but my wife, her uncle, he used to like work heavy in comic books. Like he was like a big dude in comic books. He had a good friend of his that actually used to be an editor in comic books. So he and I tend to always talk about comic books whenever we link up or whatever. But he is of the mind in which he will entertain like intellectual conversations around comic book characters. He's like one of those types. Like we and him will go back and forth at it. And he had made this point once about this movie back in the day that came out almost 15 years ago, but it was Batman Under the Red Hood. It was an animated movie. I don't know if anyone
Yes,
remembers that movie.
I've seen
It's
it.
really
Yeah.
magnificent, a magnificent movie. It's like when DC's animated movies were top tier. Like it was just
Hmm.
some of the best animated movies. So there was a scene in that movie, right, in which like Batman is chasing Jason Todd on the rooftops, and he throws his batarang with his rope attached to it to try to catch him in midair. And in midair, Jason Todd actually turns and like cuts it while it's taut. He like cuts it and then rolls to the next building and keeps moving and gets away from Batman and Robin. So like, my uncle always makes this point to be like, this is why animation is the best to tell those stories, because you cannot do that and tell that story in live action. You cannot tell the same story around how Jason Todd was able to do something that's actually probably physically impossible. You
Hmm.
could not do that in live action. So
Hmm.
he was like, it's always really important. And that I actually sort of kind of had a conversation with Kelly Sue DeConnick about this, but we had talked about how like comic books in general are kind of seen as something that's juvenile,
Hmm.
and the same thing with animation. Animation
Hmm.
is this like young person's thing, as opposed to it being like this other medium of telling a valid story.
Like, let's talk
It's like,
about that because
you
like
know
X-Men
what I'm
is
saying?
ostensibly considered a kid's show, quote unquote, but like
Right.
this episode in particular was so mature. This whole series is more mature than what we got in the 90s, but even the 90s one was more mature than most cartoons of the era. So it's like
Indeed.
I think like I said, I think the the, the way that society views comics and animation as for kids is misguided because like it's just a medium. It's not necessarily um a genre. Like
Hmm.
you can do so much with it, and it can speak to people of all ages. And for me, the kicker was the fact that adults make this stuff. So like I'm sure like a part of them
Right.
is doing it to make stuff they enjoy. Like we see it all the time when we learn more about the creators of these shows and such and books. So
No, it's real. Like I get, like you said, like these are adults that are telling these stories in the first place. Like I mean, like I said, like we look at like animation as this like young person's thing, and I think that's a cultural problem because like there are so many like it's animation is such a powerful medium. It's just such a so very powerful medium. And we
yeah,
were just talking. You were just talking about how like X-Men is a more this particular telling is seems to be a little bit more mature, but also the '90s one was mature. You know, the '90s X-Men was like kind of an OG, bro. It's like that's before Batman. We tend to forget. The X-Men was before Batman. Like
well, I think
the
they both came out
timeline
in '92,
like
didn't they?
around of 92, yeah, but I think that it actually premiered first.
Uh-huh.
It's like it came out first to like kind of, but it set the stage around like mature storytelling for kids at that time. And
Hmm.
I think that
And Batman
that's
was
sort of
not
where
talking
it's at.
about racial issues as much as
No,
X-Men, like
dog. Nah,
bigotry and all
dog.
that. Like
No, it was not doing that.
X-Men
Nah,
went
man,
hard
you're right.
into
Yeah.
everything.
Uh-huh. It went, yes, it did. It absolutely did. And that's what I mean. I think, well, can we talk about the maturity in the most, like, for instance, the most recent episode? Can I,
Yes, go ahead.
cool, bet. I actually think it was quite tasteful. I tend to think that when it comes to a lot of like animated stuff, like brutality and
Hmm.
violence and animated stuff tends to get a little bit off the rails sometimes because of the
Hmm.
medium. I noticed that kind of fall, and I think that sometimes it's stylistic, like anime does it in a stylistic way in different ways. There's different ways that it's done stylistically. However, I think that sometimes like because of the medium, things get particularly like gruesome and violent for like no reason. And I think that this episode does not suffer from that. I think that everything that happens in it is purposeful. Like any type of acts of violence or any type of display of violence and when violence is actually being portrayed on the screen, it all is telling a story. It all feeds into the whole overall narrative and plot of the story. And I think it was just so like tasteful and just artfully done. Just the position around like just the ability, like the different color choices. I had told my wife about how I thought it was really magnificent that the Sentinels, like the blasts were now like green. They were like bright green. I was like,
Hmm.
what a great visual decision. Like around like because the original blast that we always know is like purple. It's like purple red or something
Hmm.
like that. But to show that this particular Sentinel that came on to them to this time is a different breed of Sentinel.
Hmm.
It's green. Now it's green. It's like a different visual
Like
identifier.
it's a
And I
stark
think,
visual that
yeah,
like
it's a
that
stark one.
that
Right.
like changed the whole vibe of the episode. Like,
Yes.
um,
Exactly. Exactly. You get what I'm saying.
hmm
Right. Right.
and
Right. Right. And
eh,
mhm.
go ahead.
No, no, I was just simply going to say that I think that the violence in that episode was just tastefully done. I think it was like it really served the plot really well. I think it was really
I
magnificent.
I have two minds about it. Like last week we did
Mm,
discuss violence in general. We were kind of talking about Daredevil and the Netflix Marvel stuff, and just how it compares to the MCU a bit, and comics and such. And I think I kind of agree with you in the sense that like I don't particularly like a lot of gratuitous like over the top violence. Like
right.
we're seeing it more and
Right.
more these days. And to those who love
Yeah.
it, more power to you. But it's not always for me. Um, but um, so I do think that this show was able to depict something extremely violent at the same time as
Right.
not being overly gratuitous. So I
Right.
applaud it for that. But I will say, like, this episode triggered me.
Oh
As
wow.
X-Men fan, as a human being, like there's a lot
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
say. Like, I've
I have
been
to agree.
yeah, I've been a fan of X-Men for we're about the same age. We've probably been X-Men fans about the same amount
Yeah,
of time,
we're the
over
same
20
age. Yeah.
years at least.
Yes, we have.
So
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
so
We.
I
Yeah.
think
Mhm.
that for me, I do feel very as big a fan as X-Men I am, I do feel kind of tired of the cycle of violence that they are in.
In.
Like
Right.
they're
Right.
engaged in the genocide cycle over and over and
Right.
over in the comics, in the
Right.
films, and in every medium. And
Right.
like it's part of the
Right.
story. It's essential to the story, so I can't complain about it. But at the same time, as a viewer, it takes its toll because it's
Yes.
like all right now I'm grieving the comics. Like the Krakoa era is ending.
Thank you.
I'm grieving it,
This
and
exactly.
and
Exactly.
so at the
I'm
same
sorry.
time,
I'm
yeah, like
yes.
you feel me, like so like
I'm
this.
grieving that. I'm grieving that. I'm like, give them some time in that. Why do you have to take that from them? They've gone through so much. Like let these black people, let these people of color, let them be. I just like I'm
Exactly.
sorry to interrupt, but I'm in the
No, you're
same exact boat. I was saying the same thing. Sorry.
yeah, you're good. Like you understand. Like I feel like
Yeah.
I feel like it's really hard right now because I had to try put my grief aside to embrace this 90s
Yeah.
show, which is nostalgia. Like it's literally
Yeah.
nostalgia repackaged for
Yeah.
modern audiences. And that's okay. Like it's actually very entertaining, but I was willing to give it a chance and I'm glad I did. But again, it's just like
Hmm.
we're seeing another example of genocide, like we saw it in the comics
Yeah.
when Genosha, like Eva's for Extinction, Grant Morrison, all that, like
Right.
it's straight out of the comic
Right.
books, although they're doing it in their own way. But then in the comic
Right.
books, they've lost so many mutant nations. They lost Genosha, they
Right.
lost Utopia, they lost Krakoa. Like they're always
Yeah.
coming.
Right. There's also House of M. Like there's so many
Hmm.
things that they lost.
And
Yeah.
and not only that, um, we're watching this at a time where there's real genocide going on in the world. Like there's
Right.
like I,
You're so right.
I'm not, I always say I'm not the best person to speak on this because I don't live in Gaza or Israel or overseas anywhere. But from what I hear, from what I see, I can have sympathy for people who are losing their lives. I think I saw a news report the other day. Over 33,000 people are dead in Palestine, and it's like, did it have to be that way? Like, can we even call this a genocide? Like the president of
It-
the U.S. he's criticizing um Bibi Netanyahu about what he's doing, but he's not outright condemning it. Like we had some guy in like we keep having people in the UN and
right.
people in the Biden administration
Right.
saying it's not a
Right.
genocide. Like they won't even call it that.
Right. Well, they would
So it's
call
like
it that.
it's hard for me as a I consider
Right.
myself a global citizen. There's a whole
Indeed.
theory around that. Like I think it's hard to watch fictional examples of genocide and not be moved to action in the real world. Like, I'm not condemning anybody. I'm not trying, like, sometimes I think we tend to like
Yeah,
scold people for inaction, like on the internet, say like, oh, you're not doing enough, or you can do like, but we need to just encourage each other to do more, speak out more, and try to change the situation because like at the end of the day, you know, if we can have compassion for fictional characters, can we also have compassion for
true
real
indeed.
people?
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that that's succinctly said. I think that's really well said. I think that if you cannot see the parallels of what's happening in Gaza right now, what just happened in today's episode, you're, you are honestly like, just denying a part of reality. I think
Mhm.
I think like you're actually actively like just really dissociating. If you can't really see the parallels of like what that is like, these underdig like what they were doing, they were like chilling. They were like making like it was like Rogue and Magneto were having a moment, like everybody was chilling. It was like a nice time, like October 7th, like that. Like just like that. They were just chilling, having a nice time, enjoying each other's company, being grateful to be alive, and all that just happened. So it's extremely triggering. So I can identify what you're saying.
And it's not an exact one-to-one comparison because like people will look back on October 7th and obviously, there was a terrorist attack from Hamas and there
Hmm.
was a military response from Israel. And this is not just something that just sprang out of nowhere. They've got decades of history
No, they got a
of
decade. Yeah, this
mhm.
is, yeah,
So I think when we're looking at this episode, it's like, well, it felt very unprovoked. Like what have the mutants done to deserve
yeah,
any of this?
yeah. To any of
And
this,
and
right?
also who is responsible for it? Like this makes the UN
Yes,
look like absolute failures in the show. This makes
right,
the US government look like terrible. Like but we don't know if
right.
this is from the government. Like who built all these sentinels? Because we know that Gyrick was in prison. We know that they
Mhm.
also arrested
Then
Trask.
they got Trask, right? They got Trask.
So like
Yeah.
who
Hmm.
is left to be
I
still making
do
all these
not
sentinels?
know.
Hopefully we'll find out. But I mean
Bro, watch it be like Cassandra Kane or something. Like
Cassandra Nova.
not that's not my bad, Cassandra Nova.
Hmm.
Excuse me.
Yeah, like
Cassandra
so
Nova.
in the
Watch it be like
comic
Cassandra
books,
Nova.
so for those who are
Mm,
unfamiliar, in the comic books, Cassandra Nova is responsible for the genocide. She kind of manipulates one of Trask's children
mhm,
into
mhm,
launching the attack on Genosha.
mhm.
And it's kind of unfortunate in the sense that not only did she what she did was horrendous, but she herself is like a mutant, sort of like she's basically Charles's
Yeah, sort
evil
of.
twin sister.
Evil, yeah.
But I mean, but there's this whole complicated backstory because she was eaten in the womb or
Kind of
something.
supposed to be killed in the womb, or he like kill. Did he like
Yeah.
strangle her in the
Yeah,
womb,
he
or like
strangled her in
he
the
like hits her
womb,
with the
and so
like
like she's
psychic
like a
blast in
spirit.
the wound?
Yeah, she's like a psychic shadow
Dog, it's
twin.
crazy.
It's really
Yeah,
wild,
it's
but at the end
wild.
of the day, it's a comic booky villain that we can blame for
Hmm.
genocide,
Yeah.
and sadly, it's someone who's very tied to the mutants versus in reality where it might be someone more on the opposing side who's ultimately responsible. But we don't know yet. Maybe they'll tell us before the season is over. I hope so.
I don't know, man. I really hope that to between you and I hope it's not on some comic booky shit.
Mhm.
I hope that it's like some it's a little I hope it's like not some like, oh, it's just this person doing bad things, being a villain. I don't want that. I think that the X-Men are richly layered and textured characters, and each one of the characters have motivations. And I think that showcasing that and being true to that would be very, 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 very good. And I think it would be a good thing for the viewer to actually be able to nail home that, people can be villains even though they have motives, even though they have their own intentions. Like, could still do terrible things. Like Netanyahu could still do terrible things, even though he has his own intentions, even though he's like doing things in different ways. Like, let's not just like leave it up to the ether and just chalk it up to entertainment. I just think that these characters mean so much more, and these characters are tools to actually tell these stories around how we think about the world. And I
Yeah,
think that I've always said this, that comic books are they're modern mythologies. That's what comic books
agreed, a
are.
hundred percent.
I always say that.
Yeah,
So I think that
and
it's important to do that. Sorry.
no, I
Mhm.
agree. And I just want to add to that and say, like you said, these comics were meant to be a reflection of the world around us, and particularly Marvel stuff, because they place their stories in the real world, unlike DC, where you have Metropolis, you have Gotham, you have made up places. But Marvel is in New York City and other places
Precisely.
around the country and the world. So it's like they wanted to, like Stan Lee has said, he wanted to reflect the world outside our windows, and he wanted to touch on topics that were relatable and real and meaningful. So I that's why I try not to be too shy about discussing real world things, but
That's
it's
real.
like it's tough because, like, I will admit, I'm a very compartmentalized person. Like, I don't know if that's just the age we live in or if that's just me as an individual, but like, sometimes I want to have my comic book circle, and I want to have my politics
No,
completely
no,
separate.
that's yeah.
And,
No, yeah,
it's hard to separate it until.
but precisely, and that's why I always say that like it's virtually impossible, and I think that we are able to like put things in like buckets at times in order to like make it easier to digest. But at
Mhm,
the end of the day, it's all going to the same stomach, all getting digested the same place.
mhm,
It's connected. It's all a part. You could see these parallels anywhere, but before we keep going, I want to make a parallel, a sidebar.
sure.
This and really, really quick. I won't take up too much of your time, but this is in regards to the X-Men. I'm
Mhm,
actually been kind of cooking up a new idea about what I'm going to write about. However, I want to shop it with you. I want to
okay.
tell you what I'm thinking about. So there's been for the last couple of years this crusade around Magneto to for a lot of people to sort of like strip him of any sort of connection to Malcolm X, I've
Mhm,
noticed, or saying that he's not based on Malcolm X. And I think those efforts between you and I, of course, and our listeners, I think they're racist. The reason being is because I think that even if you could prove that Magneto was not initially based off of Malcolm X, it does not mean that that like Malcolm X's like influence did not run off onto Magneto.
mhm,
That the world that, as you were saying before, that the world was being shaped, and writers that were living in that world at that time were seeing what was happening, and that was influencing their writing. So
mhm,
when you have Malcolm X that existed at that time during the civil rights movement, just as Magneto was being written by these two Jewish men, like who's to say that they didn't lift certain ideals, certain like concepts from Malcolm X, especially because they're living in New York City at the same exact time. So how is it that hard of a concept for people to grasp that in some way, shape, or form that Malcolm X is loosely based it loosely is we Magneto is loosely borrows certain concepts and ideas from Malcolm X. I don't think it's that hard and far-fetched. I don't think it's that far-fetched at all, but I think that there's something to that. I think it's somewhat racist. I think there is like a refutation of like of black people in that space of being like, no, we're even though this is extremely coded to be black people, this is not about black people, this is not about black people. So like this is what I think, and I
mhm.
wanted to know, what do you think about that?
Well, wow. Okay, so
Yeah.
I will tell you what I think, and disclaimer, these are just my personal opinions, but I will tell you what it's based off of. So, um, I do believe it's fact that, like, if you read some of Chris Claremont's interviews, like, he will say he specifically created like his characterization of Magneto and Professor X is based off of two of Israel's earliest prime ministers. You've got David Ben Gurion, and you've got Menachem. I can't pronounce these names. I'm so sorry, but Menachem Begin. Like, they
Mhm.
are historical figures. They were involved in the founding of Israel as a nation state, and this absolutely does impact the
It makes sense.
storytelling and reflects
Mhm.
so many choices that the characters have made throughout the years. Like we're literally talking about Israel right now, and its place in the world, and
Precisely.
like and also the X-Men and building nations and all of that. So like that is fundamental. Like there's an undeniable Jewish influence on the X-Men. Like you said, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were Jewish men as
Undeniable.
well. That
Right.
said, I don't really believe it's either or. Like you said, like there
Mhm.
are obvious like parallels to, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
and like and a lot of the writers of the X-Men were, I believe, American. I mean, we had a lot of British ones as well.
Hmm.
But,
Hmm.
like the American ones, no doubt, are probably going to draw influence on American public
Right.
figure in history.
The
So
the X-Men are Americans. This is what I'm saying. They live in
absolutely.
Westchester. They're
Hmm.
American. This is what I mean. Like you can't not say that they were not loosely connected to some of the civil rights movement and like what the leaders of the civil some of the most prominent leaders of the civil rights movement, how are they not? That's what I'm like. I think that in general, like in just on a base level, comic books are Jewish. They're Jewish. Like
Hmm.
there's no denying that.
They're built
However,
off of
like
Jewish
they're built
imagination
off
and
of Jewish
ingenuity. Yeah.
imagination, ingenuity. This is what is just the truth. Like that's just what it is. And I think I think that in itself is its own discussion around how I think that there's been a long arching effort to make comic books less Jewish, and I think
Mm,
there's so much about that. I mean, just
yeah.
Nick Spencer. We could talk about Nick Spencer's run on Captain America alone, about how like that in itself was like I think its own anti-Semitism. Like I just thought that was an issue.
Ooh.
But anyway,
We could
I
talk about that on
digress.
another
We
podcast
can we
'cause-
can talk about another podcast. I could digress with that. But however, my point is that the effort for white fans to be like, oh, this is absolutely not about Malcolm X. It's like that effort, the effort there is to
yeah.
me is what's really grating.
No,
The
I
effort.
agree. Like, yeah, like for me, like I said, it's not either or, it's both and. Like, why do we have
Mm,
to deny one thing to embrace another thing? Like I think we can
precisely.
acknowledge like these stories are influenced by many things, and we don't,
Precisely.
and especially the mutant metaphor. Like we discuss it so much
Right.
online, like it represents all of us, not
All
just some
those
of us.
things, right? Not
And
just some of us, right? And
and
then to think that is foolish. I mean, it
mhm.
represents so many things. I mean, oh goodness.
So at the end of the day, I want to see more solidarity between like Jewish and Black
Me too.
people and just people all backgrounds, because like at the end of the day, liberation, when I think about it, it's about all of us. It can't just be some of us, because um what's the word? Oppression anywhere is oppression everywhere.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
we just gotta we gotta make these stories amount to more than just stories,
Agreed.
because these reflect people's real lives
Right.
and real deaths, like sadly,
Exactly. Exactly.
so
Exactly.
um
And I think that's why the X-Men are such a stroke of genius, such a stroke of genius. These characters are such strokes of genius. I just
yeah.
the creative imagination of these two men, I just can't even fathom. Like for them to be able to like think about things in that way and then just churn out just a bunch of just genius creations that is just such a interesting metaphor for the human experience. Each one of these characters that they churned out. That's just the two of them. That's not Jack Kirby, the king. That's not even him. Like he is in a different stratosphere.
Hmm.
However, I digress again. However, just the working imagination of these two Jewish men is something monumental, and I think it should be it's forever celebrated. I think it's just such a magnificent thing. Honestly, so cool.
Like, while we're on that topic, I will say, like, I
Yeah.
do feel like sometimes Stan Lee and Jack Kirby are overlooked because their run on X-Men was not as popular as Chris Claremont's run that
Hmm.
came after. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't like it was selling so poorly that it almost ended before
Hmm.
they had the next generation of X-Men to come breathe new life into it. And
Hmm.
and so I would say, from my perspective, like if you go back and read some of those original stories, they're not bad. Like there's a lot there.
Hmm.
Like some people say,
There
oh,
is a lot
Magneto was
there.
just an outright villain, but like I don't know if it's that completely
No.
uh Silver Age nonsense. Like
Hmm.
there was a
Silver
mutant
Age.
metaphor there in the
Yeah.
60s.
They're already
Whether
in
it
the
was,
60s.
yeah,
Right.
it might not have been as evolved as it is now, but it was present.
Hmm.
And
Right.
unfortunately, at the time, a lot of these characters, like a lot of these creations that they made, did have to present as white and cisgendered and everything, um, but they were still doing their best to focus on, like these characters have disabilities, like these characters have struggles, like these, like and then it was amazingly able to progress with the next generation. We had X-Men from all over the world of different ethnicities, different races, different backgrounds, and they were ahead of the time. Like
Ahead of the time.
they were
Right.
showcasing women in
Right.
powerful roles long before other
Right.
comics were really giving them that
Right.
credit. So
Right.
like I
Right.
think
Right.
so there's always like, you know, two sides to the story, because like we can look at the things that past creators have done wrong or even present, or we can
Hmm.
look at
Hmm.
the things that they've done right, or we can just try to take it in as a whole. But um
Yeah.
I, at
But
the end of the day, like you said, these are amazing characters.
yeah. And then
And
there's also deliberation around when and who started the characters around. Like I talked to my uncle about this, and he talks about how like what's that show? Dang it. What's that? The book. Damn it. Grant Morrison wrote it for a very long time.
which one?
It's
DC, Marvel,
it's a
Independent?
DC book. It was the book. It was a DC book. It's a show that
Doom
had Brendan
Patrol?
Fraser in it. Doom Patrol. Thank you. Doom Patrol. I'm kind of spacing right now.
You're
I'm gagged
good.
now. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Doom Patrol. And there was deliberation around what came first. Oh,
Hmm.
did who wrote Doom? Was it Doom Patrol that came first, and did
Hmm.
like Kirby and them jack the idea? And there's all of that deliberation too. But the
Hmm.
point is that who executed and who was able to like actually have these stories actually stay around and and become their own individual things. I mean, like, because Doom Patrol is dope as fuck in its own right.
Hmm.
It's like they're telling a story in a different universe, so it gives it its own quality. So, like I said, it become apples and oranges as time goes on. But the
Right.
point is that we can still celebrate that this genius existed in the first place.
Hmm.
I think.
Yeah, again, for me, it's not either or, it's both and. Like just
It's both, bro.
let's all
You see
tell
that?
stories, and let's
You
all,
see
and
that?
yeah, it's amazing. Like there's so much that these characters have to offer. And I do want to circle back to what this episode talked
Mhm.
about, because we were talking about the maturity of it. Like I'd say I watched this before I went to work this morning, and I was emotionally wrecked for the rest of the day, but I had to hide it.
Yeah,
I was like, had to
understandably.
pretend, okay, like let
Yeah.
me just hold it in,
Oof.
and we'll
Yeah,
talk
get
about
it.
it at the podcast.
Oh
um,
boy.
and like I've heard that some people are watching this show with their kids and like and before school, and I'm like when they were
Whoa.
talking about it last week, oh, that's so cute. Like they're having fun with Jubilee and Mojo and all that.
Oh
But then this week, I'm like, oh,
wow.
like I
Oh
hope that they
shit.
had a little bit of warning or something, because like that might lead to
Oh,
some tough
that is
conversations with their
great.
kids,
That's
or
great. I'd love to hear that. I love to hear that actually.
yeah, like I'm
All right, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say why I was gonna tell you why I love to hear that, but go ahead. Sorry,
no,
you
I
go
mean,
ahead
like I
first. I want
definitely
to
want
hear.
this show to reach the younger generation. I'm excited to hear that more that kids are actually watching it, whether it's with their parents or hopefully, on their own too, if they're like, you know, uh
Mhm.
like into it. So like I think I want this show to reach a new generation. But I will say, like, if it's heavy for me as an adult, I wonder how kids will react to it.
See, I agree with you. I think that like there is something to be said about how kids will react to it. And I think that that needs to be monitored. And I think that it needs to be monitored the same way that it should have been monitored when it comes to violence in video games in the 90s. They were telling us in our brains, Mortal Kombat this, all this other shit. But we turned out okay. Like not all
Hmm.
of us are, trying to shoot people up and do different things. So I what I would say is this: the reason why I do enjoy that to hear that parents are out here like watching it with their kids and watching it with their kids before they go to school. I think it's important that like even if the violence is stylized, that it is still presented to children in a safe way and in a way
Hmm.
in which you can actually monitor that with your children and actually be able to like be talk to them if they have any questions about it, because
Yeah.
we must accept that this is what America is. It's a very violent place,
Hmm.
Sandy Hook has happened. After Sandy Hook has happened, I realized that this is okay. This is just it. This is just America, and
Sadly, yeah.
America's it is badly, and it's just what the truth is that this is a violent place, and if we could tell those stories and tell those stories with characters we care about and tell it in a responsible way, like I said, I think the violence in this was tasteful, and I think it was in a really responsible way. I think it's important that kids see it in that sense, in that particular controlled environment, and especially if you're watching it with your parents. I think it's a powerful thing.
No,
I
I
do.
agree. Like I hope that this is sparking like responsible conversations
Agreed.
and hopefully inviting people to an empathetic perspective. But
Right.
it remains to be
Oh,
seen because there we do have the pushback. Like we've seen it
yeah.
already. I
See,
won't
but I
dig too
think
much
that
into that.
see, but I think the pushback is because people don't have the tools to have those conversations with their kids to explain this.
Hmm.
Like the way I just explained it to you around like why we need to have these conversations, why we need to show these things. Like when my daughter becomes of age and whenever I do rewatch this with her one day, I can explain to her that episode and why it was important, why I thought it
Hmm.
was important rather.
Yeah,
Especially because like I'll tell her like I lived through Sandy Hook, like I saw this happen, these poor kids.
yeah,
So like we are in this position now to like really have to accept that this is a part of American society. So it is depicted in a way that is, safe, because she's with me and I could tell her what happens, but I have the skills to do that. So parents that don't have those skills can automatically kind of like lash out, scapegoat, and be like, yo, like this show is the problem. Nah, talk to your kids, bro. Like, like talk to your kids, like
hmm,
figure it out. Like this is the life, this is the world that they live in. This is
hmm,
it. Like unfortunately, like you, even if you don't want them to, you want to deny it to some degree with them, it is still going to, they're still going to learn it as they get older. So
yeah. Like I think it
yeah.
was maybe Angela Davis who said like
Mhm.
instead of the prayer, the serenity prayer that says, God help me to accept the things I cannot change. I believe
Mhm.
she said, help me to change the things I cannot accept.
Word.
And I think
Word.
that's something that also the X-Men strive for, like and the Brotherhood and like like that's why everyone is looking at Magneto and be like, yes.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's true.
Like I'm totally quoting Sunfire now from season 5 of the old show because that's exactly how he said it. But I just think that in general, everyone knows like Magneto is someone who is not going to be shy and he's not going to be
Yeah.
complacent and he's not going to wait for justice. And he's shown us that much in every episode. Episode 2 in particular, episode this one here, episode 5, like but we can't just look for one person to lead us. It has to be a group effort.
True indeed.
And that's why it was so beautiful on the one hand to see all the mutants come together and live together and try to establish a nation. And every time they try to do that, it's like a beautiful thing to me. But like it's so sad to see it all crushed every time. Like
Every time.
and we
Yeah.
and we've and as Black people, we've experienced this time and time again. Like
Yep.
Tulsa, like every
Yep.
time that there's
Yep.
been a massacre or some kind of
Yep.
attack on our personhood,
Yep.
like every time we try to build something, it's like they tear it down,
Right.
reconstruction, like the list goes on and on.
It's
And
exhausting.
then
It's
people
so
say like, well,
exhausting.
why can't you just make your own stuff? Because like every time we try, y'all tear it down. So um
That's real. I mean, you were just talking about how they were trying to tear this black man down. You were just
mhm,
talking about how they were trying to come at him. He's in the middle of creating, literally in the middle of creating a show for people, creating, like trying to build. And like that people are like, why'd you do this to this character? And this is the problem, and you're homophobic and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yo, dog, like I'm trying to build, like I'm trying to do something. And people still come at him and still try to, and that's like, black people, even I know that's a micro sense, but I know Tulsa's more of a macro sense, but this is even if it's a microaggression, these little things chip away. This is a part of the black experience, and it's
yeah,
hard. It gets, and then seeing that metaphorically brought out in your characters that you love and you identify with, that shit is shocking. It's hard, man. Like I said, like you said, rather, it was a lot. Like it actually kind of took a lot out of you to watch it, and I get it. I was thinking the same thing when I was like, I have to rewatch this, but I know it's going to be hard again because I cried a lot, and And so I was like, I know it's gonna be hard, but I have to do this. I have to watch it again, you know.
Yeah, like I struggled to watch it again today because my first
Hmm.
impression was so strong. It's like, and like I said, I was
Yeah,
like, I had to go to work, I had to go about my day, and I was like,
yeah.
well, I usually like to try to watch it twice before the podcast, but so I did
Hmm.
kind of like watch it while I was doing other stuff, but again,
Hmm.
um, you know, it's a very powerful episode. Like at least to the point that I can't even just gush about like all the cameos we got, about all the
For real.
about
Yeah.
everything that happened because like this we barely touched on all the little
Right.
details because there's
Right.
so much
Right.
overarching stuff that like we gotta talk about. And like this has been great discussion so far. We can go on for a few minutes more. I don't want to cut it too short, but I do want to,
Mm.
start
Yeah.
finding our final thoughts here about the
Yeah, yeah,
episode.
of course, man. Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. I'm sorry we veered off course a bit. I know that
No,
we
this
could
has
talk
been
about
great. Like
things, but
I
uh,
love having a real authentic discussion about, why this matters to us. Because like there's a million X-Men podcasts right now. Everyone's discussing the show, and I'm happy for that. So let's bring what we can to the table and just share our authentic selves.
I have to agree with you on that, man. I think that that goes back to what I was saying about Afrofuturism before, that it is a culmination of all these things. And one of those important tenets of Afrofuturism is queer theory. You know,
Hmm.
and you know, it's like it's Black diaspora, it's feminist theory, there's queer theory involved, but queer theory is a very strong component of it. And I think that if you were to think about that in the dual nature of those things and the two-ness of things, you tend to like really think about like how you can actually, you know, use these characters as metaphors, and actually, and how it kind of you kind of just kind of it's so easy to like fit yourself into those characters, because like you already lived that experience of like the two halves of like being a, you know, like not necessarily like really adhering to like what society says that you're supposed to do, like, so
Hmm.
you already just fit right into the molds of those characters. At least I think so.
No, thank you, you too, man.
Yeah.
Like I do want to just try and see if there's anything else about this episode I gotta say before we sign off.
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean, there's so much.
right, like we could go on all day, but um, I gotta shout out Nightcrawler. It's good to see him again. The original voice actor came back. He was full of
He's so
life.
great.
He was full of life.
He,
But here's the thing about it,
yeah.
though. The thing of Okay, so let me say, like, as painful as this episode was to watch, as an X-Men fan,
uh,
we know that Cable and Bishop are gonna put their
listen,
time travel brains together
listen,
and make it
listen.
better. They're gonna fix it. They're gonna
Thank
come back and be
you.
like,
Thank
it's
you.
not
That
over
was
yet.
the only say. I told my wife that at the end of the episode. I was like, the only saving grace was that I saw Cable. And I know if after I see Cable, shit is going to be okay. That this is not set in stone. Like everything is all right. Everybody calm down. Everyone chill. Like I was like, I was like, it's cool. Cause I was like, because we saw Cable, and he was just like, shit, I'm late. I'm wrong. You know, he said something about like, not again or something along those
Hmm.
lines.
Hmm.
And I told my wife that my wife kind of thought that it was like him saying like, not again, like he actually was I think that like he just didn't make it in time. And I was like, no, 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 I think that it was something else. I think that him saying like shit, not again, like he didn't get a chance to stop the person in time. So I think he's
Like
gonna go back in time.
he's
Like
probably gone
he's
back in
like
time several times to try and fix
multiple
this.
times.
So
Right.
he's
That's
gonna
what I'm
keep
saying. I
going
think
until
that
he gets it right.
right. I think that he's gonna keep going back. So that's what I think is happening. And I
Like
think
that,
that
like that's a
so good.
recurring X-Men trope. I mean, general time travel trope,
Right.
but like with X-Men in
Oh
particular,
yeah.
going back to the '90s series and the comics, like they're always traveling through time, trying to correct what went wrong. And unfortunately, in the '90s series, I don't know if they were successful at fixing things. 'Cause sometimes they would make things
Mm,
worse. Like Bishop would go
yeah,
back
they
in time
would. They would.
to like
Yeah,
to
that's
stop
right.
concentration camps. He comes back and there's a
Yeah.
virus running around. It's like it's too
Yeah,
much.
yeah, that's
But
true. That's true. That's true. That's true.
but
Oh
I
man,
think this time
we'll
they will
see.
fix it. They gotta fix it
I think
because
so too.
we can't have this many characters being dead.
Yeah, dead. Like, yeah, I think that there's a chance that they'll fix it, man. There's a lot that happened too that show that there's like, I think a lot more is happening under the scenes. Like, did you peep the Watcher in the episode, right?
Yeah, the Watcher
You see
showed up.
him,
See,
yeah,
so
like the
that's how you
Watcher
know it's a
showed
big
up.
deal. Like it was so
That's what I
subtle
mean.
too. It
Like,
wasn't
shit is
like you just saw
happening.
like his
Yeah, it's
outline in the
subtle.
sky.
Yeah, you see his silhouette in the sky. Like he's like he knows that something is happening. Like I said, dude, this is in itself is actually, I really think that like this is a really big tilt, like really big turning point in the story at this point in time. But I think
Yeah,
that like it's going to get made up. It's all gonna come back together. I think
yeah.
Storm lost her powers. There's a lot of different things that's gonna happen. This is gonna pull
Hmm.
everything right back together. Oh, one thing that my wife and I noticed in this episode. We
What's
were
that?
rewatching the 92 X-Men 92, and we watched the episode of when they went to Genosha and everything happened when they got like, remember that whole situation, like Gambit,
Yeah, Slave
Jubilee, and Storm?
Island.
They got Slave Island, that whole shit. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I've realized that in this episode, when they get to Genosha, Gambit is mad suspicious. He's just like,
yeah,
yo, blah 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 blah. So it's like they just straight connected it to the 92. Him being
yeah.
like, this isn't right. Like something's wrong here.
Yeah,
Blah
he
blah blah blah.
mentioned
Like
like
him,
this.
he
Like I
mentioned,
remember the last time I
yeah.
was here, it wasn't so great.
Right,
Like it's a
right. It wasn't
big
so
change.
great. Like I was like, oh, that's dope. I really appreciated that they actually just kind of like really picked up the story from where it was. Like these characters like really remember what the fuck happened to them 30 years
Yeah, the
ago.
characters remember and the
Yeah,
writers remember. Beau
right,
DeMayo remembers.
right.
Like this is
Yeah,
very specifically continuing the plot lines from the
yeah,
old show.
dude.
And speaking of Gambit, like I called it last episode. I was like, the title,
Mhm.
remember it? That's got to be Gambit's famous line. And like I said it on the podcast,
Damn,
I was right, but I didn't know it hit
damn.
me this hard
Be
because
like that hard.
like I
I
thought it was
actually
just gonna
love
be
that shit.
like a breakup. Like that's all
Yeah,
I was prepared for.
damn. That
But
was
then
so
once the
dope,
show
bro.
but once they gave the teaser like a day or two ago of Genosha, because I was like, okay, okay, so we're gonna have some Genosha in this episode. And then once
Mm,
the episode started, I was like, okay, well, if they're introducing Genosha, unfortunately, I know something bad's gonna come in. But I
yeah,
thought it was
that's
gonna
gonna
happen
happen.
at the
Yeah.
end of the season,
Yeah,
not the end of
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
episode.
Episode. Oof.
So that was a
Oof.
lot. Like it was the
Yeah, it was a
highs and
whole
lows
lot.
of being
Yeah,
an
highs
X-Men
and
fan.
lows. And lows. It's so
Hmm.
true. I mean, can we talk about how creative, like, well, first and foremost, like, I loved that they actually gave Gambit space in this episode to show how dope he is.
Hmm.
Gambit's usually like depowered and declassed by all these other Omega level and like these dope X-Men, like between like Storm and
Hmm.
like Wolverine and like Cypher. There's all these like dope X-Men that get like outclassed Gambit. Like Gambit's like dope, but Gambit's not like known to be like someone to be formidable like that.
Yeah, he's definitely
And
not an
this episode,
Omega. People don't
no,
give
it's
him
not Omega.
respect.
However, this episode showed how cunning he is and how all
Hmm.
of that shit can get thrown out the window. Who gives a
Yeah,
fuck about level? Yo, that thing killed Magneto and he took that thing out. He took out the Sentinel. Gambit
yeah.
did, not Magneto.
Hmm.
Magneto got caught up in the mix of it, but Gambit figured out a way how to do it. And he saved his girl in the mix. Yo, Gambit like was the master G in this shit. I was so
He
fucking proud of
was.
like how his depiction because he doesn't ever get this level of like just like this sort of like badassery.
Hmm.
He's like usually like especially in this sense, especially in a '90s show. It's like always like, oh, he's the smooth talking like ladies love him and he's just a thief and he can do all these things. Like you remember that whole episode in the '90s, he was married to homegirl with the
Hmm.
rings and that. Remember that whole shit? That's what I mean.
Yeah,
Like it's like he's usually kind of caught up in like some situation, but like they show that he's cunning, he's strategic, he's actually like, and he's just like a badass. And I was like
yeah,
so proud of that. I was so
yeah.
proud of that.
That was written so well, depicted so
Mhm.
well. The
It was,
animation was amazing.
yeah,
Like I like it's been
man,
consistently amazing. And
wow,
if they were gonna if he had to go for him to go out like that, like they put respect on his name, like it was beautiful. It was sad. It was tragic because like he had just broken up with Rogue. Like it was kind of like
perfect. That's
mutual
perfect.
in the sense that like he understood where she was coming from, but like he didn't want it. Like he's still obsessed with her, he loves
Right.
her.
That
Um,
was that was my probably my favorite one of my favorite parts of the entire episode is that scene.
but then he died not
Because
even
he
knowing that
first and
she chose
foremost
him.
true, but in the same case, like that is exactly why it was one of my favorite parts of the whole episode is that he actually stood on business and respected this woman's position and respected
Hmm.
this woman's rights to choose, and he
Yeah.
took it like a G and was
Hmm.
like, "Yo, I respect that. Yo, what you need to do." He wasn't bitter. He didn't speak down to her. He didn't do any of that. He actually modeled what it looks like to actually handle such a matter like that. He modeled it like a G. He was like, "No problem. I wish you the best type shit," and kept it moving. Like, and I love that. I love that he actually was like chivalrous and he was a gentleman about it.
And he's
And
been a
I think
gentleman the whole
that
time.
he's been a gentleman the whole
Like
time,
he gets a
right? And that's
bad
why I
rap. Like
loved it.
people call him
Ugh.
like, like they say he's like sexually assaulting Rogue, but like that's
What?
not what
Oh,
happened.
what?
That's not what happened.
No.
Morph under Sinister's influence tricked Gambit into like trying to kiss Rogue while she was asleep.
Yeah.
But he thought
Right.
that was the actual
Right.
Rogue, but that's a whole like that was not his
Yeah,
fucking
that she was feeling him, and that's been their relationship for that long. And he's like
Mhm.
always down to like put his body on the at risk to kiss her. He's always down to do that. It's her that's
Yeah.
like, chill. I don't want to hurt you.
And he's always asking her for her consent too. Like
Right,
he'll
he's
take the
always asking her
pain.
for
Like yeah.
consent. Right, he'll take it. He always asks for her consent. Always asks for her consent.
So
He is so important in that. I loved his depiction in this episode. I loved it. It was
yeah,
peak Gambit for me.
and like some people were worrying that like, oh, this version of Gambit is just a simp for Rogue, like he's just like a
He's the
scrub
ultimate
compared
G.
to Magneto, like Magneto
Please.
rolled in like with his boss
Nah,
energy,
dog.
with his,
Nah. Magneto is
but
a boss, don't get me wrong,
and he
but
is, but
yo,
like Gambit, like I've been rooting for him, like I love
oh,
Gambit and Rogue, and I ultimately want to see them back together.
I think
I
that'll
mean I love
happen.
Magneto, but like he'll be all right. Like
He'll be all right. But like I
he'll
said, like I think that truly that nah, they'll get back together, bro.
like
I
I
really
did
do think so.
But I did love seeing the history that we were trying to figure out. When did Rogue and Magneto first get
Yeah,
together? They finally gave us that information here. We go
so
back to
good.
before she even met the X-Men. Mystique
Right.
was involved under her like alias.
Yeah, you peeped that? Yeah, you peeped that?
Yeah,
Yeah, and the
like
alias, that was
again,
dope.
they're connecting it
Yeah,
to the original show
yeah,
and
yeah,
Rogue's
it's so good.
origin
Yeah,
and
it's so
all
good.
that stuff. So good. Like we saw
Yeah.
Nightcrawler and Rogue, acting like
Yeah.
siblings and
Acting like
friends,
siblings.
and
Oh, that
and
was
and
so
uh, and
good.
Gambit too. Like they have such familial relationships. Like it's just
Yeah,
so
so
beautiful.
good.
And like I said, we could go on and on and on about how great this
Man, it
episode
was
was. We got
so
like the
good. Oh
cameos. Can I
God.
just shout out a couple of them? We had
Yes,
Exodus.
please.
We had
Yeah,
Leech and
Dazzler.
the Morlocks. Dazzler. We
Yeah,
had
Dazzler.
Cypher with the I,
Cypher.
Cipher.
Wait,
Not
Cypher showed up? I gotta
yeah,
rewatch it now. I gotta look
like
for him. I didn't see
like
he showed up.
no, not Cipher with the
Oh,
Y, Cipher with the I. There's two X-Men who are
oh, the
called
eye.
Cipher for some reason,
Oh,
but
okay,
I think her
okay,
name's
okay,
like
okay.
Elisa something. But she's black.
Oh,
She's a different Cipher than
oh,
Doug Ramsey. Um, so
whoa.
look out for her because she was all over the
Wow.
episode. And then we
Right.
had Pixie, we had Glob, like we had so many. Like I've been
Yeah,
trying to tell people like, don't rule this show out as pure 90s nostalgia because they might throw in stuff
seriously.
from later eras, and like we're starting to see more. Like
Right.
this is a 2000s era
Yeah,
storyline. We're seeing characters who are from beyond
yeah,
that. Like I
right.
mean, they're not the focus yet, but this
Mhm.
show
But they show up.
exists in hindsight, so they can draw from any era and just make it fit, and it's really
Man,
exciting,
bro.
but
Wow.
it's also very sad. Like I'm still sad. Like
I am, but but like I said, I'm proud of it because I think that it's doing the right things in regards to shaking things up and actually continuing a story that's already been dropped. I mean, like I think that it was a tall order to begin with. It was a lot to riding on that. Understand, as I said, like that iconography of the X-Men of everything that entails, like from that's the best to this day. I think it is still the best selling comic book of all time. That X
then
Men
the
was it
'90s,
X Men
X-Men
thousand
number
that
one in the
the
'90s.
'90s one X Men '90 yeah one in the '90s Jim Lee's X
Yep,
Men yeah like
and
that is still the highest selling comic book of all time. Like everything, and then from that we got the show. So like everything, like the iconography of these characters
it's
is
like X-Men in its
unparalleled.
purest, rawest form. So I
Yeah,
get that's
yes, it
why
is.
that's why we're here right now with this reboot, because like
Right.
I was a fan of X-Men Evolution more than it, but I loved them both. Like I can't not
Mhm.
love X-Men 92. I just got X-Men Evolution hit me at that time. That was just right for
I hear
me.
that.
But I just think like you said, the iconography of '90s X-Men is just so you can't
It's
deny its
top
impact.
notch.
And
Can't
so that's
deny
why
it.
like that's why anything they do in the live action is like, are they going to be able
It's
to
gonna
recreate this aesthetic? Are they going to be able to cast it
no,
well enough? Like I do think
no, they're
MCU
not.
might do better than Fox, but I mean
They
Fox
will. They absolutely will. They will.
like like
I know
Fox
it's going to be good. It's going to be good. It's not going to be bad. It's going to be good. I'm telling you, it's going to be good. It's just not going to be what we think it, of when we think of X-Men. It's going to be its own version of the X-Men.
like
It's going to have
honestly,
touch points
I
of
feel
the
like they
X-Men from the
might be better
90s, but
off doing it totally differently. Like just make a team of Miss Marvel, Namor, and like
I mean, they kind of did though
yeah.
from the with singers movies in the 2000s. It's kind of like yeah, it's the same lineup, but they different suits and
Mhm.
sort of different kind of dynamics. There's elements of like this, but I think that they're actually trying to go comic booky and right now.
Mhm.
And the next one is going to be
Like
like oh, bright color spandex and bright suits, and they're
like
going comic book. I think.
that's the feel. Like I feel like that's
Hmm.
the surest way to success if they essentially just
Yeah,
continue the animated
just
show
go
in live
comic
action
book.
form. But like it's
Yeah,
just
just
kind of
yeah.
I just feel like it's just harder to do because real life actors they age. You can't like have them portraying the same characters forever. I mean you can, but it's just like it's more noticeable than like animation. Like the voice actors have aged, but like it's not as
Mhm.
noticeable because the character designs look pretty.
Depends on it depends on like what how long they want to actually tell the story and for what length of time or which characters. That's the good news about the X-Men is that there's a rotating cast of characters, so you can always just keep the story going. I was thinking
Yes.
that what the best things for X-Men would be for them to go the route what they did with like Winter with the there was the Falcon and Winter Soldier route. You do an individual episode, hour 1 hour episode, like a mini series on the X-Men, 1 hour episode each character, and then you do a big movie out with all the characters that you give. Because I think the best thing that they all need is time for each one of the characters for us to learn about the characters in this form. I think that we're if we don't do that, it's we're all going to be relying on what we think about the characters from the 90s X-Men. They should give it time for us to be able to be like, oh, this is the story we're trying to tell with these X-Men. And I think doing it in the original format of how they was doing these like mini movie shows, the series on Disney Plus, that would have been the best format for the X-Men to like build up to it if they wanted to do that. And I think that I think that that in itself is a they're kind of dropping a ball on that. I think that that's an easy layup. They could easily because I think more people like are more interested in watching shit at home these days. So you could build up that way and get people back into movies that way. I think, but
Well,
I don't work for
this might
Marvel.
be a
I
controversial opinion, but like I'm perfectly fine with them just continuing animation and forgetting about live action. Like I don't need
respect
it.
that too. Hey, yo, look, same here.
because,
I'm of that space too. I'm like, yo,
because like
I'm
next
cool with that.
episode is called Life Death Part 2. So it sounds like we're getting a Storm centric episode. We've been waiting for
Nice.
Storm to have more spotlighted stories focused on her. Life Death Part 1 was good, even if it was brief. So like hopefully this episode will have more room to breathe. I mean, I'm a little nervous about it being a Storm centric
Mm-hmm.
episode after this episode because like does that mean we're not going to
Mm-hmm.
follow up on everything that just happened? They'll probably
No,
follow
we
up on
won't.
it. Like
No, we won't. I
I
don't
think
think
we'll
so.
see. Like they can't just leave it hanging, but
I think they're gonna leave it hanging.
well they might.
I absolutely think they're going to leave it hanging, and I think something's going to tie what happened in the previous episode at the end. There
Yeah.
may be some ties into that, but
Yeah,
they're
Storm
going to
might
just
be
start
watching the
that
news and be like, "Oh my
right
god,
and
what
be
happened to
like,
the
oh
X-Men?"
shit, and blah
Or maybe
blah.
by the end
Yeah,
she's
then
finally
like
able to go back to the X-Men and she's
right,
like, "What happened?" Like I don't know. Like we'll see.
right.
Like
Maybe Bishop will show up. Something, you
mm,
know what I'm saying? Like we don't, like,
like
but I don't think that they're gonna. I think there's gonna be like they're gonna focus on Storm and leave us like,
whew.
what the fuck?
Yeah,
I
like
think they're gonna do that.
that's gonna be wild, but I'm here for it. Like I think, Life Death
Mm,
is such a milestone story arc for her that I
mm,
think we
mm.
need to see where that goes. And I'm still interested to see, where it goes. But this episode did end on such a cliffhanger. It's gonna be like we like if it's
Yeah.
1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we gotta get some follow up on it. Um
Yeah, man. I think that they're gonna I think that honestly, like we're gonna figure out what happens from someone else's perspective. I can see it happening with Cable or someone else. I don't even think they're gonna go back to I think they're gonna leave them in shambles for a while because like we lost Magneto, we lost people, we like lost
Gambit,
people.
Nightcrawler, and even
Gambit,
more
like yeah, we like
Morlocks.
lost people.
Leech,
Right,
not
we
my
like
baby, not
Le-
sweet baby
that
Jesus, not
that was
Leech.
actually Leech's that like Leech's situation actually maybe that made me like ball.
It
Actually,
was
that made
so
me cry
sad. Like
so
he was like,
hard.
Magneto promised us that it would be okay. Like it
Jesus
was
Christ. And he
devastating.
said Magneto being like, don't be afraid, child.
Hmm.
Like that is just it. How many like I can't tell you like I mean it made me think about like a situation like Philando Castile, like
Yeah.
having to like tell his kid that it's okay, he's dying. Like
In
you
the
like it's
midst
like
of
that
like
kind of in
the
the midst
attack.
of that
Yeah.
attack. Yeah, it's like it like fucked me up, bro. Like to for him to be like for Magneto to still be a G and still be the father in that.
Yeah.
Yo, dog, it just like it got me so it hit me so hard, man. I was like it broke my heart. I cried at that. That shit broke
Mhm.
me. I couldn't look at the screen. I was like, oh no.
No,
I was
I
like
feel you,
crying,
man.
man.
Like
Yo,
I'm not a big crier, but I still feel
yeah.
it in my soul. Like
Mhm.
I like it was devastating a lot that happened in
Yeah,
this
man.
episode. And
Yeah.
like
I'm not. Yeah, I've recently become a better crier. I'm trying to
mhm.
be more of a crier, and this show makes it very easy for me.
I
For real.
understand, man. No, that's beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
do want to take a minute because we haven't even touched on the Scott and Jean of it all. We
Oh
got
my
to,
goodness,
if we
these
have
two.
time.
Yeah, of
Any
course.
opinions? You want to go first?
Yeah, I actually do have an opinion actually that it's sort of like a comment that my wife and I were actually having a discussion my wife and I was having earlier. Because my wife actually has been very critical of Scott Summers for quite some
Hmm.
time, and I actually think he's pretty great. And
I've seen a
one
lot of that
point,
in the fandom. Like
yeah,
a lot of women have a lot of ire towards
is
Scott
it
and his actions, and a lot
see?
of
And I
men
think that's
seem to be
fair.
apologizing for him. And like I get it on both
See, but
sides.
I think that like I think it's extremely fair about women's position on that and being like
Hmm.
critical of him.
Hmm.
Because one thing that my wife was saying was that she thinks that he needs to chill on like dating psychics, and I was like, that's a brilliant point.
He does have
Holy
a
shit!
he does have a
Holy
type,
shit!
to say the
Yeah,
least.
but understand that like also on top of that, this if we talk about how traditionally, especially in American society, women are actually kind of conditioned to be the emotional laborers for men.
Hmm. Hmm.
You dig? Like they're usually the ones that are have been conditioned to believe that they do the emotional work for men. Either it be that they, you know, like have to let a guy down gently when they don't want to date them, whatever the
Hmm.
case may be, or if they like are in a relationship with their significant other, a man, and they don't like something that they're doing, they got to tell him in a certain way to protect his ego, whatever the case
Hmm.
may be. The point is that women are usually responsible for the emotional load and emotional labor of men, and in a lot of cases, and Scott is very emblematic of that, of like being with women in which they do the emotional work for him. Especially in
Yeah.
this case, it's very figurative with them being psychics.
Yes. Speak on it.
You know,
Yeah.
so yeah, you dig. So like, I can understand why women are like, motherfucker, like dog, go like figure your shit out, bro. Especially if he's the leader of the X-Men, you're like, bro, like you got to get this shit together. But I am of the mind of think that Charles Xavier is very accountable for that, because like he was sort of like their pseudo daddy, even though that they were living in the house together and they ended up getting together. And bro, referee that, figure that out. Like they both traumatized kids. Like make sure that they get what they need to figure out how to coexist peacefully. They do not coexist peacefully. Gene and Scott are not a good couple, right? My wife and I conceded today. They're not a good couple. They're not happy together.
Mm.
They
Ooh,
not
who
happy together,
okay, so what do you
dog.
who do you ship them with then?
To be honest, I actually think that I personally think that they are a good couple. Like I think that they could make it work.
Hmm.
Especially what put me in the zone of thinking that is Kuroka. Is that is like is especially with like what was kind of alluded to, which kind of got a side. It was like a it was kind of like a bump in the road in the Kuroka arc and the Powers of X of how Wolverine and Cyclops
The
is
thruple
how
situation?
their thruple situation was, like how they had different rooms right in and Jean's room
Yeah.
was right in the middle. I think that their relationship could work if they had a situation like that, because if they had a situation like that when it came to them being a throuple,
or
it
open
requires them to
relationship, we
be
should say,
an
because
open
Emma was
relationship.
involved too. Maybe it
Yeah,
was a love
Emma was
square. I
involved
don't
too.
know.
Yeah, even Emma. Yeah, Emma was there too, right? So even if they decide to have an open relationship, that require that I know from experience. So even if I'm having like an open relationship, it requires transparency. It requires being able to communicate directly, and I advocate for what you need and knowing what you want and understanding your own expectations. It requires all of those things. And if Scott
Mm.
were to do that work, that would make him a better partner,
Oh
and
yeah.
then that would make her a better partner to him, and they would actually work really well. So I think the throuple situation really, really speaks to how well they've worked their shit out, because they have to trust each other to actually do that. To have a throuple with Wolverine and Emma and all that other shit, they have to trust each other. They have to talk about shit. They have to be open. They have to be transparent. And I know from experience, I'm an open marriage. I know from experience. So you have to be able to be in that space to actually, do that work. And it's a lot. And I tell you personally, in my experience, 80% of it is personal work of you have to do on yourself.
Yeah.
And if Scott's doing that work, that means he's like got it for Gene. Like they'll make it work. I think
Yeah,
they'll make
man.
it work. But my wife does not think so.
That's all right. Like everyone is, like we said, they're entitled to their opinions, especially like we want to
Mhm.
hear more women's perspectives on what's going on here. Like I love that you guys are watching it together. Shout out to your
Yeah.
wife. She's welcome on the
Yeah,
pod.
she's fantastic. Yeah,
But
dog, she's fantastic. She's incredible. Yeah, man.
I gotta say my
Mhm.
perspective on the Scott Jean stuff. Okay, so one, Scott, Jean, and Maddie, they're all grieving. They've all lost
Right.
something in this season. Like Scott,
Precisely.
like his whole life was turned upside down even more with the reveal that Madeline was a clone, and Jean's life was turned upside down by being cloned and by
Right.
being replaced, and now she's back to what she thought. Like, it's hard to go back home again when all this has happened without you and no one even realized you were gone. And then
Precisely.
Madeline is just dealing with being a clone. That's
Right.
hard. Like that's her eternal struggle. Like getting people to validate her existence.
No, it's
And
real.
I've heard so
Yep.
many people speak on how a lot of her anger is justified because
It is.
like she's like, you guys know me. Like I have been here. I just had a baby. Like how are you gonna just like
Right.
treat me like a like I
That's
don't like I'm
her
not real.
family.
Like
Right.
that's devastating too. So it's like
Hmm.
it's I do wish we had a little more insight into like Madeline Pryor, like why she chose that name, why she does the things she does. Like
Yeah.
I was glad to see that she ended up in Genosha. She's on the council now. I think it's really cool that we
I
have
like that.
a
Yeah.
Genoshan council that's similar to the Krakoan council. You've got
Right.
um you've got a lot of people involved. You got Moira
Yeah,
McTaggart
dog.
and Banshee. I
Yeah.
used to say all along in Krakoa, like I thought
Right.
that toward the end of
Uh,
Hickman's run, I thought we would get Moira on the council in a public way
council.
rather than
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
hidden
Yeah.
underground.
Yeah.
And then,
Right.
but that's not what happened. Like as soon as the Moira reveal
Mm-hmm.
happened, she kind of turned into a big
Mm-hmm.
villain, and that's it
Mm-hmm.
is what it is. But
Yeah.
um, it's interesting to see Moira back in the show. It's interesting to see who else was. We had Nightcrawler on the council.
Yeah.
Uh, Madeline, Moira, Banshee, Emma Frost. Okay, we
Emma
had
Frost.
Sebastian
Oh,
Shaw.
Sebastian Shaw.
Who else was there?
Oh, see,
Am I
we didn't
missing
even
anyone?
see we got to keep it in the Cyclops and Jean space, because we didn't
Okay,
even talk
right.
about how
Yeah,
like
I didn't even finish what I was
that
gonna say,
whole
but go
shit,
ahead.
because he was my boy was out here cheating real quick and all of that. We didn't even talk
Yeah,
about that. He's like cyclically cheating, and
and I knew right
she like
away that was
walked in on
Maddie because
them.
her hair was down. Like
Ooh,
that visual cue is so perfect because I was like,
yeah,
he's definitely talking to Maddie right
that
now.
was fantastic,
And like and
fantastic,
plus
yo.
the
Oh,
flip of it because in the comic books he was having a psychic affair with Emma.
affair with
So for
Emma,
them to make
right?
it here in this moment
But
with
that's
Madeline is
magnificent,
very interesting because
magnificent,
because
magnificent.
I'm actually glad he hasn't like
Mhm.
abandoned Madeline and his child entirely. Like
Me
that's
too.
the woman you
Me
had a
too.
baby with.
Exactly.
As much as you love
Exactly.
Jean, you've built a family now, so you gotta take some ownership of that, some
Yep.
responsibility. And
That's
I but
absolute word.
so like I gotta say, like when Cyclops was having his interview and he went off about like you know, I'm y'all are normal and I am not, and I'm pissed about it. Like, um,
Hmm.
I understood where he was coming from. Like, he's grieving, he's dealt with so much. Like, I think I don't know if I agree with what he said, but I definitely understood where he was coming
Hmm.
from. And both him and Jean were popping off left and right. Like Jean was when Jean started like saying some stuff about how she called Maddie it, I think, at one point, and
Oh,
like she was like,
snap.
"You love it more than me," and I'm like, "Girl, like calm down,
Ooh,
like
boy.
cause from my perspective, I'm like
Spicy. It's
I know
quite
you're mad at
zesty.
Scott, but
Wow. That's
let's
crazy.
remember that
I
she
don't
had
even
a
peep that.
baby, like like as
I need
much
to rewatch it and peep those little things.
yeah, like Jean was trying to go through her memories, and she said Scott was in most of them, and like they were both going over like their connection,
Mm,
and like the biggest thing that Jean was upset about was that like that psychic rapport that she and Scott had, he's now having that with her replacement. So like I get like that's a big insecurity, that's a big problem. Like how do you move forward like when the man you love has already moved on, but yet he's trying to like
see,
commit to you. It's like it's a very in
see,
between space right now. We need more
I
time.
challenge that. See how I challenge
Okay,
that though.
tell
I
me.
challenge that. I challenge both Gene and Scott in that because I challenge Gene in a way in which I think Gene is being insensitive to how the amount monumental loss that Scott just suffered. He lost his child. That's his kid. He lost his kid, and she's being extremely insensitive to just what that would be due to him. Like what, how,
Mm-hmm.
and what ways that could do. You know, how that could affect him. Like I
Mm-hmm.
get that she's going through her trauma because that is a part of her trauma of like how she gets completely abandons Scott in that, just completely leaves him out to, you know, and doesn't even care about his feelings and goes back to like how much she feels wronged about him cheating. Now, to challenge Scott, I challenge Scott in a way in which I think Scott should have had an outright conversation with Jean Grey and said, listen, I had a child with this woman. I can't just not stop talking to her. Like I can't not talk to her. I need to have these conversations with her because we are both suffering a very unique loss that you do not understand. We could talk this out together about what that means for our relationship, but we have a unique loss and we need to talk about this together. And he should have been the one to have that conversation with Gene and been like, yo, this is what I need.
Mm-hmm.
But as Scott said in the episode when he had to give up cable, he said straight up, do any of you know what it feels like to be abandoned? He said that because he has abandonment issues. He
Yeah.
has all these spaces in his time in his life in which he hasn't ever got a chance to just focus on what he needs because he's been a leader. He's been, you know, all these different things. He just hasn't got an opportunity to do that. So when it comes to him needing to have this conversation with Jean Grey, it makes sense that he can't do it. And it makes sense that he would like lie and cheat.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. And this is why women get annoyed with him because
Yeah.
it's like, yo, dog,
Yeah,
do
it's
this
very
work.
much in his character to avoid hard emotional
Hard
conversations, like you
emotional
said,
conversations. Right.
and
Right.
some people have even said this is a sign that Cyclops might be on the autism spectrum. I don't know. I can't
See,
really
I
speak
don't
to
think
that.
that, see, but
Um,
I think he's just traumatized. I think he has a
it could
lot
be.
of trauma.
Oh, that's for sure. But I will say to
Yeah.
challenge on him on that, like he's not the only one. All X-Men got trauma. All X-Men got abandonment
Yeah.
issues. Like when he
That's the
said that,
point.
I bet all the X-Men were polite enough to not respond, but like they were like, yeah, we do know what it's like to be abandoned. But
In
even
some way,
then,
shape, or form, but he
yeah.
dealt with it in a different particular way.
But
And
he
we can
honestly
understand.
wasn't abandoned though. Like his parents got snatched up by aliens and they just didn't come back. Like I don't know, his mother got killed. Like it's a whole complicated
Yeah,
comic
it's a
booky
complicated thing.
situation.
Yeah,
But I'm just saying that like with Cyclops, yeah,
Mhm.
he's definitely got a lot of trauma and
I
he
still
does
think
need
he
to
could have
work it
that
out. Does need to
conversation.
keep
Just like
having
have that
conversations.
conversation with her.
And
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 he just won't do
Gene,
it.
like on the Gene thing, like you were saying that you think she should have been a little more sensitive to Scott and losing the child. I have to say,
Yeah.
there's a lot of debate about whether he lost the child or whether he abandoned the child. Because even though he said, "I'm not abandoning my child," 2 minutes later he walks out the room and is not involved in anything else that happens with the child. So,
I disagree with that particular take that people I've heard people say that's the same thing. Oh, he lost his child. I think that that's a different. I think like witnessing it taking place is different than actually him making the decision and actually having to like deal with the decision he made. He I think that he couldn't witness what took place because he already made that decision and had to live with it and understood that was the only possible way. And not being able to witness it, that trauma, unless you're in that position to have to give up a kid, I don't think that anybody really could speak on like how traumatizing that could be to like actually see that not only you have to give up your kid forever, your kid is actually on its way to dying. And this is the only way you can save it. So
Yeah.
I think that people's assessment around being like, well, like, yeah, like he abandoned it at the end, like I don't think he really did. I think he had to give up his kid, which he made that decision. And he at first was like, there's no other way. Like, are you really serious? Like, no, I'm not doing this. But then he made the final decision, but then he couldn't deal with looking at it happen when it took place. I don't think that that's necessarily abandonment, especially after he made the decision to let him go.
I mean, I get where you're coming from, and I get where other people are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to like
Mm-hmm.
speak on it because like I haven't made
Mm-hmm.
up my mind about this yet, but I can definitely
Mm-hmm.
agree. Like this is an impossible choice,
It's an
very
impossible
hard
choice,
thing to
right?
for a parent to have to deal with. So I give grace to everyone involved. Like I get they're all grieving, they're all dealing with this trauma. With Scott in particular, I would say, um, I do think that there is, I would not call him a hypocrite or anything. I would just
Mm-hmm.
say that when he said, I'm not abandoning my child, he was expressing how he felt and how he feel like about being a father and also having to make this decision. But in the end, I think he trusted Maddie to make the decision that she thought was best. Like because it was two, they both had different feelings about it. He could have
Mm-hmm.
tried to force his opinion on it, which I guess would have, if he wanted the child to stay and try to find a solution in the present. I don't know. He didn't have time to voice what he
No,
wanted in the situation.
yeah, no
So
time.
I think ultimately he respected the mother's wishes, which are like, I think this baby has the best chance of going to the future, and I'm going to do it regardless of what you think, Scott. Like, I'm gonna send it to future with Bishop, and I'm gonna give him some happy memories, or I don't know what
And
she did. She put a little psychic thing on him, just letting him know that he is loved, and I just think it would have been
so,
nice if Scott could have
yeah.
been there with her in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately, it just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't meant to be.
I think it's fair to criticize him for leaving. However, I think that it's also fair to give him context. I think that when it comes to like giving up, like giving up a kid, I think for Scott and then being in that position, I think that I don't think he had the ability to make that decision, to be honest. I think that his experience around being abandoned, as he straight up said, I think that in itself arrested his ability to make that decision thoroughly. So I really do think so. I think his trauma really, really, really put him in a position to be like, I can't really make I can't really be the one to watch this happen. And I think that because I think of his own personal experiences around that, and I think that that's something that needs to be placed. I think it needs to be factored in. I think that that's important to add to his context. Like I think it's critical. I think it's fair and valid to be like, yo, bro, you still left. Like I get that, but in the same case, I'm still like, but what about his reasons for why he did it? What about his pain around that? What about what took place in his life before this moment that led him to think that this was the best decision to just leave?
Like
That he
sometimes
couldn't
it's
see
the
it.
it's the wiser decision to remove yourself from a situation if you're
Mm-hmm.
not equipped to handle it. Like if you are
Mm-hmm.
like sometimes if you're about to like harm somebody with your actions, it's better to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Or I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what he would have done had he stayed in that situation, but like I think he just felt like I just need to walk out of the room in this instant because, you know, I just can't handle what's going on inside this room.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
I don't know.
think I think that
It,
his decision to leave, to me, I think his decision to leave is arbitrary at that point. I mean, I think like because I think about it this way, it's like he's also grieving a death. He is. And when I don't know if you ever had to put down unfortunately, like, had to put down a beloved pet, like an animal or, like, a cat or a dog or something like that. Have you
Like
ever had to have that happen in your life?
I never had a lot of pets, but like I know what you
Mm.
mean. Yeah.
Yeah, that particular there's times in which you have people in your life in which animals in your life that are so close to you that you just can't see it happen. It's like, that this time has come, that you have to, like, allow it to be and allow it to pass on, but you there's a part of you that just can't accept it, and it's hard for you to, like, viscerally go through it. And I think that was extremely important to represent because everyone deals with trauma and deals with loss and grief in a different way. Because that's
Yeah.
grief that
Like I
that Scott was dealing with.
I really appreciated him speaking on that this episode, like and putting it in context
Hmm.
because like
Right,
he basically said like I am a mutant and I am not
right,
normal, and that means
right.
that terrible
It's
things happen
not.
to me every day that will you'll never have to worry about, and I'm still
Right,
fighting for you guys to survive. Like while you're trying to kill me and my people, like this is before the assault on Genosha. So like like
right.
he's just acknowledging like
Jesus
I
Christ!
woke up
Wow.
this morning, my wife was a clone, my baby got a virus and it got kidnapped by Mr. Sinister, and then I
Right,
had to like send him into the
right,
future like or my wife
right.
decided to do that, and like so like now I got my wife's original body back in the like it's like a lot going on every day.
Seriously, seriously.
It's I almost wish the X-Men did have more time to deal with their trauma and work it out, but they
Me
just
too.
don't because like life keeps happening, and sometimes that's real. Like in our real life, sometimes
Yeah,
it's thing
that's
after thing
extremely
after
real.
thing. Yeah.
That's what I was telling my wife about Scott before is that, because she was like telling me about how she's critical of him and gets on her nerves. But then I was like, like much like being a person of color, being black, or a person of color, is like sometimes the social conditions don't dictate that you have the ability to actually take care of yourself in that way. You just can't. It's like you got to like work two jobs to take care of your family. You got to like, you got to like stay up overnight to take on a job. You have to like be at school and have a job, and you're
Hmm.
too busy, like, or we're not being paid a livable wage right now in America in a lot of
Hmm.
spaces. So you work super hard. You next thing you know, it's late at night, and you forget to eat, and you have to go like there's all these different reasons around how we just can't take care of ourselves the same way or to the most optimal way, especially
Hmm.
if you're being hunted all the time, if you're a person of color being living in a world in which you at least feel like you're being hunted all the time,
Hmm.
even though I'd say you are being hunted all the time because there's enough evidence that suggests that.
Hmm.
But if you're the X-Men and you're literally being hunted all the time, where do you have time to like do that work?
Exactly. Like that's why I say this episode triggered me, but also like just
Mhm.
diving deep back into this series. Like I went back and watched the original episodes, like the Night of the Sentinels, like and all that. Like this show
Yeah,
starts from a position
right,
that the
right,
government has
yes,
AI out to murder you,
yes,
like the underclass.
yes,
Like this is insane. This
yes,
is a dystopian world,
insane.
and it's not too far off from reality. But it's like,
Again,
but it was also ahead of its time. Like I mean, I do think that the X-Men and like the Terminator and all this have like some kind of weird like relationship where they keep kind of like feeding into each other in terms of like the tropes that they
that's
explore.
Afrofuturism, brother. That's
Exactly.
Afrofuturism, bro.
Like there's
That's
so
what it
many
be like.
examples. Yeah. And so I'm just like,
Mhm.
just when you take that basic premise that the X-Men are mutants who can't even walk down the street, can't even be in their own bedroom, like Breonna Taylor, like can't even be in their own bedroom and be
Precisely.
safe.
Can right,
Like
be safe.
it's
Yep.
horrifying. It's sadly real, and it's like
Yep.
it's like how do we fight that? How do we overcome that? I hope
That's
that
right.
we can explore answers in the genre of fiction or like in the medium of fiction, but like that's the thing that I worry about like with so like I said earlier, like with this show being a new like a reboot, I'm also grieving like the end of the Krakoan era and the comics. Like at the same
Me
time,
too.
there's a changeover happening. Like I don't know why this is happening. Like why couldn't they have waited to like after the show came
Waited.
out
Right, right,
to like
right.
do a changeover so we don't have to have
I
two
know.
changes at once? But like
I know.
um
I know.
I mean,
I
I'm
know. I
just
still am very upset that they're ending this run right now, and I'm upset that it was ended. And I mean, like I haven't finished it. I'm still reading it really slowly,
yeah, there's a
because I'm
lot to
reading it
read.
through
Like it's a
like
lot of
yeah, there's a
books.
lot to
I'm still
read.
trying to catch
Yeah,
like
because I'm reading a bunch of things right now, bro. So like late at night. I know that that's one of the things we want to talk about, like what we're reading right now. So we're gonna get into that really quick too.
if we have time,
Yeah, if we have time,
go
yeah.
for it.
But yeah, man. But nah, dog. Like, so this is so dense. It's like so much that happens in that story. So I just kind of hope that I wanted it to be that they had more time to like explore like those other parts of the X-Men that isn't like so rooted in like just that much like violent trauma. Like, especially in regards to just this way the story was being told with them being able to be like resurrected. That shit is
Yes,
like that shit blew my
yes,
whole mind around how brilliant
absolutely.
that concept was. Like, especially just it's comic books first and foremost. Like, of course you could do that, of course, but on top of that, it's just let that truth about comic books that no character stays dead. Let that be a function. Let that be something that that serves an actual function in the story. That's masterwork by Jonathan Hickman to understand, like, oh yeah, everybody knows that these characters come back because everyone dies in comics, right? But what if there's a reason for what that happens, and what if that's used as a tool to tell a story? What if that's used as a tool in the X-Men's journey? It's like,
Yeah.
yo, brilliant,
Like
brilliant.
for me, the brilliant aspect of it was like he was like, of course, when you have this many mutants and this many awesome powers, if you get
Hmm.
a few of the right ones together, they will find a way to resurrect
They'll figure this shit
people.
out.
And
Yeah.
like the X-Men were already known for like coming back from the dead
Hmm.
prior to having like
Right.
five mutants whose job was to resurrect them. But
Hmm.
now that they had this, like, how do you go back from that? Like, are these mutants no
Back from
longer
that.
around? Are they
Yeah.
going to stop using their powers together? Like they've done so much to
That's
try
what
to
I
destroy
mean.
that concept, like as
Cause
soon as they built it
yeah,
up, I'm like, why?
right. And it
And
has
it's
so
just,
much it has so much potential
yeah, and it's so
still.
frustrating because like like a lot, like we can admit that the X-Men, like the fight against genocide is a big part of it, but it's not the only part of it. Like you
No, it's
said,
not the only part of
resurrection was
it.
a huge
Right.
theme. Redemption has been a huge theme. Like
Right. Oh my
found
God.
family has always been a huge theme. Like
Not
there's so
right.
many themes
There's
that
so
like
many
matter that and
themes.
make the X-Men X-Men, that like I just kind of
Jesus.
resist the idea that it has to be a constant cycle of genocide.
Right,
Or at
right.
least in like such quick
There it
succession.
is.
Like God,
There it is.
like I've lived through too many of
Right.
these fictional
That's
and
right.
real genocides to like be
That's right.
comfortable with it.
Right.
But
No, that's right.
I'll try to give this new era a chance, I guess. But
Hmm.
um
I mean,
I'll
I'll
admit
try to
to
give
being
it a
kind of,
chance too, but
yeah, but I'll admit
I'm
like it's
bummed.
just, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I'm like truly bummed, bro. Like I like it. Like it was just there was something truly like magical. I'm talking like Marcus Garvey Pan African type magical.
Right.
It was like magical. Like it was just such a powerful story to tell with these characters. Like I remember there's so much of it that just stays with me. Like I'm
Hmm.
not even reading the book and I think about it and I think about it and I port it over to like parts of my life and I think about it and think about the themes of it in my everyday life. Like I think about like there's a theme, a couple of panels in which in one part of the story in which like the X-Men like have to like infiltrate like this space shuttle
Hmm.
and they all die. And
Hmm.
but the panels before they die, when like Wolverine and Nightcrawler are talking to each other before they know they're about to go kill themselves, is so goddamn touching. Just them talking about their history. Because at this time, I don't think they even remembered. I don't even think they knew that they'll be resurrected. I don't even think they knew
I
that
think there
yet,
was a
or they
hope.
did know that. They did know that. They did
There
know
was a
that. But
hope, but
those
it wasn't
current,
like a
yeah,
guarantee because like they were the
wasn't
first
a
group to be
guarantee.
publicly resurrected
Right.
in that
Right,
after
right,
that
right, right,
mission.
right, 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 right. But then it wouldn't. But then they ask questions, the philosophical questions, like, would it even be us at this point in time if we get resurrected? And
And that's been
will
an
this? Will
ongoing
I still?
question.
Oh man, yeah, it's so good.
It's like another brilliant piece of writing. I mean,
Hmm.
I will give Hickman credit, but I also want to, shine a light on all the collaborators he worked with and all those creatives, because like they
Yes.
contributed a lot and added perspectives that he
Yes.
couldn't necessarily bring all on his own.
Oh no,
But to
absolutely
his
true.
credit, I will say that you know, just the fact that this new nation did rely on Mr. Sinister's genetics,
Mm-hmm.
it is like a deal with the devil. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's I mean, it's frustrating how much that came back to bite them. Like, I mean, of course it would. His name is literally Mr. Sinister. Like, if you're gonna make a deal with him, you know it's gonna bite you in the back. But I just feel like um but it's something very biblical about that, something very metaphysical about like to create paradise, you gotta have a serpent in the garden, I guess. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
Like
mm,
like the unfortunately their system of resurrection relied on him providing those DNA samples and
hmm.
um
I
you know
happen to love Mr. Sinister. I think he's just a really a messy bitch, man. He is just
yeah,
so sad. He is so sassy, especially the way he's written in those comics. He's so sassy, and he's
yeah,
so much fun to read, man.
he's
He's
a fun
so
villain.
good.
I
Yeah,
mean,
he's a
I
fun villain.
it's some people will say they've he's played out now because like they have relied heavily on him in
Mm,
this Cohen era, especially the latter stages of it, like Kieran Gillen's run. There's a lot
mm,
going on with Mr. Sinister, and there's four or so clones now of him that are like
hmm.
also a major problem. So
Yeah,
it's like
yeah, yeah.
it reaches the point of too much Sinister, but like at the same
Hmm.
time, it had to be dealt with. But all I'm saying is that um like yeah, it was very interesting to see the X-Men
Hmm.
find a way to resurrect themselves
Right,
in what appears to be a whole state. Um,
right.
like that's essentially them. I mean, the only difference is they might miss like a few minutes of their death or a few
Right.
days of their
And
life,
that
but
just that's the brilliance of it. It's like they just back themselves up like it's the cloud. Like that's how brilliant the concept is. It's like it's right there. We already understand it. It's intuitive. That's the best writing is if you don't have to do much interpretation. You could just pick it up, lift it up as a reader. Like, oh yeah, I get that. Because we live in a world in which everything is on the cloud. Everything gets easily. So if you like are working on something and you delete it at the last second, you know it's still in the cloud somewhere. You could just go retrieve it on the cloud. Like that's the
so
same sort
that's
of
like
concept.
another interesting theme about it where the X-Men are
Mhm.
locked in this eternal battle with AI, with technology, like
Right.
robots, like
Yes.
and
Yes.
but when you look at it, there's also a lot of similarities between how the mutants operate and how the robots operate, and also between how the mutants
Exactly.
operate and how the humans operate. Like we're all
Hmm.
intertwined, so it's like interesting to
Yep.
how they've set up this arc. But like it all goes back to the original stories, like Days of Future Past, all this
Right.
stuff. Like and even in this show, we've got the eternal threat of robots, trying
Hmm.
to kill him. I mean, I I think like there's that element like we should fear the extremes of technology, but we also, you know, can acknowledge that it can also benefit society. Like it's twofold. It's tricky thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, it is, it is, it is. And I think that there's, like I said, I think that those characters are really our tools to kind of like investigate all of those questions anyway. I think that for instance, like I think that, what does it mean to even be human? If the X-Men are closer to AI at times, it's like, or are they closer to humans? Because like, they are just a step in the chain and evolution. That's all they really are. And they are kind of in at their core humans. They are humans, but
That's
they
what
are just
that's what the
humans.
Master Mold said in that episode of
Right,
season one. They're like, there is
right.
no difference between mutants and humans. You are
No.
flawed in your thinking.
Yeah, you're
Like,
right. There's
but
barely any difference, right? They're not really. They're
uh,
like,
the,
yeah, they have extra abilities. They have different things they could do with their bodies, but they're basically humans.
but
They live
although
in
I do think
life.
that when they did master the power of resurrection, that
Hmm.
caused people to look at them as like too
Yeah.
far removed from humanity. Because like if they're immortal, if they're living forever, people resisted that. Like it made them appear less human, I think, to some people. But I was trying to make people remember, like, they're not like immortal. Like, they can die. They
No,
just
they
come
can
back.
die. They just
Like,
come back.
they still
Yeah.
experience death.
Right, 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 right,
They're
right,
not
right, right.
invulnerable. They're
Right,
just
right.
resurrected. So like
Right, just simply
that's
resurrected. Yeah.
so that
And
was a
that's totally different. I think but again, I think that the story itself is very nuanced, and I think that if you try to read it with a lens of like and like one particular view around how you think about what it could be interpreted as, you miss a lot of stuff. I think there's a lot of ways in which it could be interpreted around what those stories sort of mean. I think that was the point I made about like Bishop on Threads a couple of weeks ago about like Bishop about you know yeah maybe the original character, maybe the original writers or original creators of Bishop didn't have these sort of concepts in mind in regards to like trauma being inflicted onto his body and him being able to wield it. you
mhm.
know Maybe that wasn't originally their ideas, like, oh, thinking about like what these things mean when it comes to it being a black body. But the point is that like when you take on these sort of characters that live these lived-in experiences, they can take on other meanings. The meanings around these things end up becoming much wider than what your intended audience or what your intended purpose would be. As my wife usually says, she usually tells me, is that intention does not always equal impact. So
True,
what you
true.
intend to do, it could just, blow up. So I think that, and Bishop is one of those characters that maybe we haven't really had that conversation about it, but us black nerds, we need to be having those type of conversations around like how our narrative is being portrayed, and if it's a black character, that's our narrative. So like we have the narrative, we have the narrative around how that should be portrayed and the questions that should be asked. So why
Yeah.
can't we ask these questions around
Mhm.
black bodies and
Yeah.
media and how we
Bishop,
think about them?
Sunspot, Storm, and everybody
Thank
else.
you.
Like
Thank you. I weeped when Storm lost her powers. I weeped. Like her
it
saying, like,
was
the
so
clouds,
sad.
the rain, I can't feel it. Like her just being that weeped because of especially like the like position around like black women and the divine nature of them being close to earth and being rooted to the all like it's all of that shit broke me the fuck up. I did it because as I said before, intention doesn't equal impact. Yeah, Claremont made this character, but you know, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was Claremont that made it with Storm, but either way, if it was someone else, I might be wrong. But
Len Wein and Gabe Cockrum,
Lin
but
Wine, yeah, Lin
Claremont
Wine and
was
Cockrum, yeah,
pretty much there from day one
kind
and kind
of
of like
day
took the
one, they kind of
reins.
molded her. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, it was Lin Wei, yeah, right. So, but the fact of the matter is that she has all this like extra meaning to black people, and like when
And
things
that's why
happen
we
to
need
her,
more black people
those
telling her stories. Like
reverberations,
I think we've
telling
had a very
stories. Right.
limited amount of black people working on
That's
her,
right.
but that's
That's right.
okay. More and more we're getting our foot in the door, and
Mhm.
we're gonna try to bring an authentic perspective to these characters.
Right.
Like Eve Ewing is scheduled to be one of the new
She's so
writers on
dope.
the new
Yeah.
X-Men run. So
Oh
I'm gonna
man,
at
she's
least
so
check that one out.
incredible.
I'm gonna try to check
Yeah.
everything out, but like,
Hmm. Yeah, I'm
but
gonna
I
try
but
to. Yeah.
but I might need to take a little break because like, you know, too much of a good thing
Word.
sometimes can turn to a bad thing. But
Hmm.
um,
I mean, there's a lot of people I want to read. I mean, like Gail Simone's going to be writing some stuff, and I think Gail Simone's the truth. I've liked her for quite some time. So I would like to see what she does. Like, like there's some good writers that they got on the. I'm also like, curious to see how they're going to set this up. I mean, I wonder if like is it going to be like a contract with these writers? Are they going to like sign them for like a couple of years? You know how like DC's been doing that, like signing like writers for a while. I wonder how Marvel's going to do that this time around, especially if you want to tell a new X-Men story, and because I think they sort of did that with Hickman. They were like, all right, we'll employ you for like a couple of years. Like this is like, they kind of treated it like a long standing contract. So I'm curious, is like with these writers, especially because some of them are like writing in different spaces. Like Gail Simone is like DC. She writes DC sometimes. So I'm just curious, like what I'm wondering, what do you know anything about that? Like how that works?
well,
How they pick writers?
there was a interview. Shout out to the Homo Superior podcast. They interviewed Jordan D. White just recently, and they
Dope.
like I recommend that because now he's pretty much basically done with his era as editor of the X-Men line, and he sheds a lot
Huh.
of insight on like what it was like working with Jonathan Hickman working with, all the other creatives who were involved, and what the
Right.
changeover was like. And honestly, I think he said Hickman was like, when he was brought on, they were only expecting him to do like maybe
Hmm.
6 issues. It turned into like
Whoa.
12 issues, and then became like became what it is. Like so I think that speaks to
Whoa.
the fact that like the success and the longevity of these books depends on how much
Hmm.
we invest in them. Like if
Interesting.
we want them to
Interesting.
go on, we gotta buy the books, we gotta support the
Right.
creatives, we gotta read the books
That's
and
right.
watch the shows, like and do it
Right.
as much legally as we can. Like
Yeah,
uh,
exactly. Hmm.
like if people have to pursue illegal means, I'm not gonna tell them not to, but
Knock
I
them.
think
No,
but
knock, knock
but I do
them.
think that
Not at
like
all.
if you can afford to invest in this stuff and you like it and you think it's meaningful, that's how we get it to continue. Because like comic books were hit hard with COVID, like everybody and everything. Like I remember, you might remember as well, like they literally stopped printing comic books for a while, and there was a
Yeah.
paper scarcity, and like and there was just so much uncertainty. So like it's amazing that they've bounced back. Like there's still
Right.
more uncertainty in the market. It's just like we're like paper has been competing with digital for over a decade now.
Yeah, for
There's so
so
many
long
different
now.
things, but like as long as people are reading and sharing and promoting and like talking about it, they're gonna keep making these things. I do feel like personally, I like quality over quantity. Like if they just
Me
had
too.
one X book, maybe two,
One. Yeah. Yeah.
like that's
Yeah.
enough. Like you could tell a
Exactly. That's
lot.
all.
Like
That's
that's
more
how
than enough.
Claremont became Claremont,
Yeah.
because he was on
Right.
1 or 2 books max,
And
and
you can
he's
focus
had,
on those.
yeah, and
Right. It's just too much. And I think that that's because we live in a culture of like consumerism. Like everybody
yeah,
want to
where
get as much as
more
possible, much as
is better.
possible. Like,
Mhm.
yeah,
But
exactly. Like,
sometimes
nah.
less is more, I think. So
Yes, indeed.
I would like to
Constraints.
see a little more restraint from Marvel and DC, but
Right.
I can't tell them what to do.
Both
But
of them. Yes.
yeah. So we'll see.
There's too
Like
much Batman. There's too much Joker. Like this Joker joint. Like,
and
miss
honestly,
me
there's
with
too much
that.
X-Men. Like if you're gonna reboot X-Men,
Yeah, it's too much X
why are there
Men.
like
Right.
6, 7 books right out
Thank
the
you.
gate? Like
7
like when
books. Like,
when
yeah,
Hickman
like,
came on, it was 2 books. It
listen,
was
you
House of
absolutely
X and
right.
Powers of X, and
House of
that
X and
set the
Powers
tone,
of
and
X. That
everything
was it.
unfolded from there. So like, yeah, it did
Right.
unfold into like this giant thing, but like at least it started from a
Damn.
concise point that you can
Started
recommend to
from
people,
right.
and like say
Right.
you can read this as a standalone, or you can follow it and see where it goes.
Hmm.
Like that's what they need to be doing more of, in my opinion. But
I
I think,
agree. I wholeheartedly agree.
well, I
Is if
think
they
that's a good
focus on
place for
like
us to kind of
yeah.
wrap it up,
Hmm.
because like we've talked about the show, we've talked about the comics. Do you have any final thoughts before we go?
Yeah, yeah. I just want to give like a quick shout out to the stuff I'm doing really quick.
Absolutely.
So I have a podcast. I'm going to be actually jumping and I'm starting in May. It's going to just be Big Boy Nerds introduction into Afrofuturism, and I'm going to be talking about all these different elements of Afrofuturism and trying to actually interpolate that into just different avenues and different ways in which it actually could um, be spoken about in different spaces. Either it be like media or it be like animation or whatever the case may be. I have different spaces that I want to kind of talk about it, and I that's what my podcast is going to be about. And I also have a newsletter called The Wanderings of the Big Boy Nerd. So you could find that on Substack. And thanks.
Awesome. All right. And do you have any social media you'd like to share?
Yeah, of course. You can follow me on Threads at Big Boy Nerd, and also you can follow me on Instagram at Big Boy Nerd as well. Actually,
Awesome. All right. Well, looking forward
hmm.
to it, man. Like let me know when your podcast comes out, because I will be there to check it out. Um
Nice. Thank you.
and
Yeah, it's
listeners,
so much fun talking. Yeah.
likewise, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was great talking to you. We had a lot of good conversation. Look forward
Mhm.
to more. You're welcome back anytime. I would like to say,
Yes.
listeners, if you are interested in following me, I'm at DMVCBN on most platforms, primarily Threads and I guess Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. We're on YouTube now. We are
Nice.
Also, continuing to put these out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Um, Speaking of Apple Podcasts, like just recently they added this ability to like they're transcribing everything that we say, which YouTube already does, but like uh
Whoa,
Apple is doing it.
that's crazy.
It's pretty
Wow.
crazy. It's kind of
Yeah.
cool feature, but again, I have this little paranoia about technology. I'm like, wow, they're gonna just have
Hmm.
my whole voice and my whole record of what I've said. Like, oh God.
It's bro, it's already happening. They're the
Yeah,
machine learning. It's like already starting to happen. I've seen that they're actually trying to train AI to actually get our diction right, the way we speak
right.
right.
Like
It's
we're literally giving this to them for free. Like
uh
that's what I'm doing right now. I'm giving
yeah,
them my entire
we are.
voice and perspective and opinions like, and image and
Yeah,
like,
but that's
well, it is what it is, guys. Like we're just here,
you
and this is
know,
a testament to the fact that we're here, and
right.
we're gonna exist,
That's
and we're
right.
gonna keep talking about stuff we love. So,
That's right.
um,
That's right. We will control our narrative. That's right.
that's right.
That's right. That's right.
All right, man. Well, thanks again. Thanks to everyone who listened this
Yeah.
far. We hope to continue the conversation. We got another episode of X-Men coming out next week. So until then, fans, how shall we sign off? Shall we say Excelsior?
Oh yeah, of course. Excelsior indeed.
Excelsior. Good night, everybody.
Excelsior.